9 o'clock, and I want to be conscientious of everybody's time. So who is here from the furthest east of California, so I can figure out how late you guys are? Who's here? You know, I know Peter is here in Poland. Is there anybody further east than Poland?
Israel.
That's true.
I'm from Israel.
Nice.
I'm from Poland too. Hello.
Greetings, you guys. I'm glad you're all here. Stop that share. We are streaming now on YouTube, and get this thing going. For those of you that are new to this, this is a monthly little get-together that a few people formed on Atari Age back when COVID first started happening and all in-person meetings kind of went away. So a small group of us started forming just a monthly chat where we kind of share with each other what we were working on and what was going on in the community. And the gentleman who founded it, Howard, who I don't see on right now, kind of got tied up with doing some other things. So I took it over and moved it to Zoom and started sharing it on Facebook and tried to get more people involved because, one, I got sick of hearing myself talk and sharing about FujiNet or sharing about a couple of little things that I was working on, because I know that there are other exciting things going on out in the 8 and 16-bit community other than just FujiNet. And no slam on Tom, because he knows how much I love this thing and how successful it's been and how exciting it is. But I kind of want to hear about other things going on too. And it started just with Atari. And since then, I kind of wanted to expand a little bit because, again, there's a big community of Commodore users out there, and I want to be inclusive of them. And, Thomas, again, not to talk about FujiNet again, but he's pushing ColecoVision's Atom computer to bring FujiNet to that soon. Apple community, there's a big community. And for some of us, it's kind of hard to get around to all these shows and events. So I figured an online meeting would be a great solution to bring the community together. We've had some amazing guests. I'm still working on Nolan Bushnell. He's kind of elusive to pin down. He's kind of like herding a cat. But we've had some past Atari employees here. What was it, last month? We had one of the founders or the creators of the 6502 CPU, which was awesome. That brought a lot of people out. This month, we've got a very well-known YouTube personality, David Murray, otherwise known as the 8-bit guy. I discovered him probably a couple of years ago on YouTube, and I absolutely adore watching his podcasts. And I loved it when he was running around Tandy, which is where I kind of got my start. I was a manager for Radio Shack back in the late 80s, early 90s. I've watched him grow. I've watched him expand his amazing studio now that he's built out in the backyard, and watched that process. And I thought it might be kind of fun to have him here just to share some of the stuff that he's got going on. I know, he was kind enough to send me one of these so I could start playing it. This is the first bit of Atari 8-bit software that I've gotten in a box like this since probably the mid 1980s. So I was excited when I got this box. The packaging was awesome. It brought back a lot of memories. Opening it up and finding one of these things inside of it made me really happy. Of course, I immediately copied it over to my FujiNet because I want to keep this disc safe. And using it is going to wear it out at some point, maybe after 40 or 50 years. But anyways, I wanted to bring David over here to have him share what's going on and have you guys ask some questions if you do. And we'll enjoy his company as long as he's willing to give it to us. And then after that, we can talk about some FujiNet things and some of the developments that are going on there and anything else that you guys are working on from around the world, because I'm sure there's more than just FujiNet in the works right now. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to David. I see him smiling here in his studio, and we'd love to hear from him and have him share what's going on. So David, take it away.
Hi, Gavin. I haven't even tested my audio yet, so I hope it sounds good.
Sounds like we're on YouTube. It sounds just like I'm listening to you.
All right. I didn't have anything particularly prepared to talk about or anything. I'm here to, I guess, answer any questions or talk about whatever you want me to talk about, I guess.
Well, how about talking about this, and of course, you've got another game that you did quite a while before this that I haven't played yet, but I've seen a lot of the videos on it. But just give us your background on what has made you such a fan of this community. What got you started? What's driving you to spend countless hours pulling out hair, making new titles for us to enjoy?
Actually, I just really enjoy game development on older systems, well, particularly Commodore systems, because those are the ones that I know how to code for. And it's just, I don't know, it's challenging to me. It's almost like some people enjoy the challenge of playing a game. I actually enjoy the challenge of writing one. And, especially like, the original version of this game was on the Pet, which was a platform that, let's just say, hardly anybody writes games for that platform. So I thought that would be an interesting challenge. But I really enjoyed writing it. And I also, when I wrote the game, I wrote the game that I like in my mind that I always wanted to exist that really didn't. And it's a combination. For those who haven't really seen the game, I actually took ideas from platform games like Ultima and combined them with like first-person shooter games like Duke Nukem 3D, and and I took all of these different concepts and put them together into one game, which I don't think there's anything out there like it. So I thought it was a pretty unique concept, and I've just enjoyed both writing and playing the game. So
what language did you use when you developed this first version for the Commodore? I mean, for the Pet.
6502 assembly. I mean, that's realistically on those types of machines, that's the only language that is going to provide the speed necessary to make that kind of thing possible.
How has been the interest in the Pet version of this game? Have you sold quite a bit of copies of this for the Pet?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I can't give you an exact answer because and maybe this wasn't a great idea, but I thought it was at the time. I bundled the Pet, VIC-20, and C64 versions all on the same disc in the same box. So I don't have any way to really break down sales between those machines because of that. Just judging by the feedback that I get, both in email and on groups, and even, there's the official Attack of the Pesky Robots Facebook group, and there's about 2,000 people on that group, and they're, posting their questions and experiences with the game and whatnot. And I don't see that many people playing the Pet or VIC-20 versions. I mean, there are some, but it's like for every, 20 posts I see about the C64 version, there might be one post of somebody playing the Pet or VIC-20 version. So it's not, super popular as by comparison.
Yeah, I'd really be curious to see how many Pets are still out there in the wild. That's a computer. It wasn't the first computer I used, but it was the first computer that my elementary school ever got, was the Commodore Pet. And I remember we had a little miniature traffic cone that we'd have to move between the pets. Whoever was sharing the disk drive at the time had to have the cone. I guess kind of the first token ring network, if you will. But I'm really curious. I would love to get my hands on a Pet, and I have no idea why, because I really don't know what I'd do with it. But I'd really be curious to see how many Pet users are still out there.
Well, keep in mind, they're making that mini Pet now, which a lot of people are buying as a hobby, and it runs the game perfectly. And that was actually one of my incentives for writing it, because I just gotten one of those mini Pets. And so the number of pets is actually increasing if you consider the mini Pet. So.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, an FPGA and Mister and things like that probably would enable that as well. But I'm a purist. I mean, I've got a garage full of old original arcade cabinets. I can't stand like one-ups. I don't like to emulate if I can get away with not emulating.
I agree.
Having the original hardware, there's something about it that's just it's nostalgic to me. I want to touch and feel the original thing. But in a pinch, I'll use an emulator, and that's why I was saying I was trying to play this, and I can't get it to work on Altera yet. It crashes when it loads. And I'm sure it's probably a setting that I've not been able to figure out, but maybe somebody else has been able to get it to work on an emulator. But that's why I still keep the original hardware. And your main focus is Commodore, is it not, David?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, are you talking about the channel or are you talking about the game?
You in general and the things that you do. I mean, like I said, I'm an Atari guy by heart. That's what I had growing up. I didn't get a Commodore 64 until about 3 years ago. So I know nothing about Commodore. Atari is the way I started out.
Well, on my channel, I try to jump back and forth between all the different platforms. And admittedly, I haven't spent a whole lot of time talking about Atari systems. But you know, I've done a number of episodes with you know, Apple II and old like PC compatibles, Tandies, you know, things like that. And yes, I mean, I would say there's probably more Commodore videos than any other kind, but I try to keep it somewhat well, what's the word I'm looking for? Inclusive of other platforms. Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed that with you. You definitely have a lot. Hey, I don't want to hog all of the time here by asking all my selfish questions. I'm sure there's some others out there that want to talk to you. And like I said to everybody before we started this, you know, feel free to interact. It's definitely, you know, this meeting is going to be a lot better if we get people asking questions and talking back and forth with each other. The only thing that I do ask is that you raise your hand to talk, because it's a lot easier for us to have one person kind of communicating at one time. You know, of course, you know, let us know when you're done so the next person can go. You know, be respectful. You know, we're all here because we've got this common love, and it's this vintage computers that, you know, most of our spouses, if we have spouses, thinks we're crazy about. But you know, I'm more than welcome to let anybody here talk and interact with David. And this is a great opportunity for us to talk to a guy that many of us have grown to really enjoy his channel. So Peter, I've got you up first, so go right ahead, my friend.
Yeah. Hello, David. This is Peter from Warsaw, from Poland. And my first, maybe the previous lesson with Bill Manish told us that limits provides creativity. So maybe that's why we love retro computers. But my question is, are you using emulators to write the code, or you are writing on real hardware?
So I use a cross compiler, and so I'm writing on a modern computer with a modern, you know, text editor and whatnot, and then I compile, I test in the emulator, and then I try to test on the real hardware. You know, every time there's a major change to the code, you know, I'll throw it over on the real hardware and make sure it still runs on that. And there's actually been a few cases where things worked on the emulator and not on the real hardware, and that actually applies to a number of different computers, including the Pet and the NES and the Plus4 and so then we have to, you know, try to figure out what is it that's different about the real hardware, you know, and then we have to you know, make sure it works on both. Yeah.
Okay, so I think I've seen your every video, so I enjoy a lot of your videos, and of course I encourage you to provide more videos about Atari. And also Gavin provides a lot of new extensions for Atari, and we have also FujiNet extension. I know that you are familiar with about that, and so we think about digital providing of software via FujiNet. So maybe it will be good idea to publish software via internet right now for retro computers also.
Thank you.
Okay, Jason, you're up, my friend. Where did Jason just go? Just vanished. Oh, there's Jason. You back?
Hi, everyone. Hi, David. Thanks so much for joining us today, and thanks for all the great videos you produce. So I'm an Atari guy, like most people here, and grew up with Atari, and had a neighbor friend that had a VIC-20, so that was kind of my first exposure to Commodore. But I didn't have Commodores until a few years ago, so I've been playing around with the C64 and the VIC-20. It's a lot of fun. But my question for you is, I'm curious. You know, we as a Atari community talk all the time about the things we love about Atari, the things we love about programming for Atari, player missile graphics, etc. I'd love to hear from you. What do you really love about programming for the C64?
Well, I don't know. I would single out the C64 specifically. In fact, to be honest, it's probably of the Commodore machines, it's probably my least favorite to code for. Because its memory is so fragmented and well, to be honest, I feel like the C64 is somewhat of a Frankenstein of a VIC-20, and like they took the VIC-20 and they crammed a whole bunch more stuff in there and got it to market as quickly as possible. And don't get me wrong, the C64 is a legendary, it's a great computer, but from a programming standpoint, it's actually somewhat annoying to work with. Where the VIC-20, the +4, and the PET are considerably more straightforward in a number of ways. So from a programming standpoint, I actually prefer on those, but naturally I focus on the C64 a lot because, you know, that's where the market is. I like what I think it was Gavin that was quoting earlier, talking about the need for creativity when you're working with limited systems. And that's what I love working. Well, there's a couple of reasons I like working with the older systems. I mean, because people often ask me, well, David, why don't you code games for modern systems? And there's actually two reasons for that. One is I do enjoy the challenge of seeing like, ooh, how can I make this work on an older computer? And in many ways, sometimes when I get the game idea in my head, I'll have to think about it for weeks before I even like start writing any code, because I'm trying to figure out how can I make this work, you know, with the limited RAM and whatnot that I have. And when I get the idea, then I'll go sit down and I'll start trying to code it. But the other thing is too, is you go to a modern system and you want to write a game. If you want anybody to play that game, realistically speaking, you're going to have a big team of coders, you know, and you're going to need $1 million or multi-million-dollar budget, and you're going to need multi-million-dollar advertising budget and all this stuff just to get like anybody to play your game. And so, you know, with the retro computers, you know, one person or a very small team can still make a compelling game for those systems. And there's, believe it or not, enough of a market. I mean, nobody's going to get rich making games for vintage computers, but there's enough of a market to sustain it. And so I mean, like I said, writing games for modern systems would just not even be feasible, you know, so at least for me. So so hopefully that answers that.
Cool, thank you.
Oops, I was muted. Forrest L, you're next up on the list. Talking to myself.
I don't think we can hear him.
Forrest, you gotta unmute. Here he comes.
All
There we
right,
go.
I'm really not used to use Zoom because I'm still working with people, so sorry about that.
No problem.
My name is Forrest. I'm 23. I think I will be one of the youngest here, but I'm actually more into the more questions about network and around the retro bright thinking, because I'm a part of a community in my town that we are really sitting and watching your video quite regularly, because I'm more into PowerPC and my friends are more into building Pentium's machines and all kinds of those stuff. I don't know if it will be called cheating, but may I ask more than one question?
Go ahead.
Absolutely.
All right, so I will start with the networking. I'm really currently living in an apartment that have like problems with getting connection via Wi-Fi, and I decided that I might do like what you did with your parents' house, that I will connect two parts of the apartment via fiber between each other. But I found out that might be a bit more complicated that you show in the video. And I think it was 2020 when you showed that about the fiber.
Maybe.
So the question is about the network. How can you convert the fiber into something that will translate it properly to LAN? Because maybe this is stuff that are not available in my town, or just something that I don't understand yet.
So I'm actually kind of mesmerized watching your cat for some reason.
Yeah, I know.
But
to be honest,
that seems like a kind of a, people usually don't ask me about modern networking equipment, I mean, it's really not actually that complicated. I mean, you either need there's two ways that you could go about it. They make a media converter, which I'm actually using that on one side of the connection. Well, actually, I have two fiber lines. I have one coming out here to the studio building, which is where I'm at right now. And then I have another fiber line going next door to my mom's house. But yeah, you can use just a little media converter. They're like $30 on Amazon. And it just, the box has Ethernet on one side and fiber on the other. And that's like the easiest way you can connect it in. But you can also buy switches that have fiber built into the switch as well. And I've got that as well. So there's really not a lot to configure about it. You just plug it in and it works. So,
all right. And what I wanted to say about the cat, her name, first of all, is Lali. And the first video I ever watched of you is, I think it was the iMac G3 cat house.
Oh, yeah.
So I actually created something like that, but for her tissue box. So it's nice to use an old G3 for that. And the second question, it's about those retro bright stuff. How much it's by? I mean, just a second. I'm translating. About exposure to chemicals, because this is when you mentioning some weird names of chemicals, the question is always about how dangerous it is, and how much about people around you might be exposed to that.
Well, the principal chemical that I use for retrobrighting is hydrogen peroxide. Granted, it's a little bit higher strength than what you typically find in the pharmacy, but it's basically the same stuff that you would put on a cut on your finger. And the stuff that I buy is meant to be used in your hair for people who want to change their hair colors and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's not inherently dangerous as a chemical. I will say that the strength that I use of peroxide, when I get it on my fingers, it turns my fingers white. And if I don't, you'll see me in the video, I'll usually dig my hand into the bucket and pull it out. But what you don't see is I almost always immediately run to the sink after I've been in there and rinse it off. I mean, I don't think it would necessarily cause me any harm, but it turns the skin white, and and it can kind of burn if you leave it on there for a long time. So, but yeah, I don't think it's particularly dangerous.
All right. Thank you very much, David.
Thanks, Forrest. And we're all enjoying the cat, I think. So thanks. Next up, Nicolia.
I think it's Nikolai.
Nikolai. Yeah, thank you. I just want to ask how to get started with learning assembler language for the Commodore 64.
Boy, I do get asked that a lot, and I wish I had a good answer for that. I started learning that when I was like 12, and so I don't know, like, if I were to learn it today, I'm not really sure what the best method is, other than just looking at some existing source code, getting a compiler, getting some books like the Commodore Programmer Reference Guide. That's what I used to learn it with when I was a kid. There may be better options now, but yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have a really superb answer for you.
That's okay. I think it will be quite a challenge for me. I'm only used to programming in the Python.
Oh, okay.
But thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I really got to remember to unmute myself. Francisco.
Hello, everybody. David, I was in the DFW SWABA meeting a couple of days ago, and you had the 128 running Pepsi robot there. And one of the amazing things that I saw was the implementation of using the second screen on the unit. One of the questions that I think is, you remember, I asked you, you upgraded the VDC to be able to support that second screen. Well, if you didn't do it, can you tell me a couple of the tricks that you do to get that graphic looking how it looks? Because there's limited colors in the 128 using the RGB side.
That's I actually explained that in a recent video I did on the game, on the port for the 128. It's kind of hard to explain. On the video, I have a number of drawings and stuff I use to help explain it. But it's yeah, we almost have in some ways created our own graphics mode on that chip. That's it's definitely non-standard, and it involves tweaking a lot of the registers on there. And long story short, we were able to create a graphics mode that actually literally is just that one little section in the middle of the screen, like all that black area around it, that's actually like non-addressable. And so we created quite literally a 128 by 64 bitmap where we can put any of the 16 colors we want in there for that map. And so that's why when the game is sitting at the menu, it doesn't display a map over there. It displays like a little graphic image, but that graphic image is the exact same size as the map. And that there's a reason for that. And that's because we're still using the same little custom graphics mode. So,
okay. So it's interesting how you work around the limitation of the VDC memory. So it was kind of interesting. That was awesome.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time talking about that. Me and Scott Robinson, the guy who did most of the principal coding on it. We spent hours on the phone brainstorming how we were going to display a map on that screen because it is like not really well suited for the task, you know. So I was pretty happy with the solution we came up with.
Thank you.
You're
Okay, next I've got Norman. You're next up there.
Hello there, David. This is Norm Davey. I'm the fellow who you recently sent your source code to me so I can port it to the Atom.
Oh,
and so I was curious, have you ever done a review on the Atom?
I have not. I've only even seen one in person a couple of times. I know a little bit about them, but I've never really used one. I don't know enough about them to do a review on one. Yeah.
So how did you manage to get so many people to port your game to various platforms? Was that just putting out a request, or?
I'm as baffled about it as you are, to be honest. I would like to think that it's because it's a good game and people enjoy it, but I think also it just boils down to people want the challenge, you know, and now that there's, you know, once I announce there's ports for, you know, X, Y, and Z, suddenly people start realizing, oh, well, gee, there's only, you know, these other systems that remain. You know, now it's almost like a challenge that we got to get them all filled, like fill all the blanks, you know.
And I agree. I mean, I thought, well, this game should be able to run on the Atom as well, and so that's why I thought I'd try and port it.
But I will say, because of the nature of the game, being that it's a tile-based game, it's inherently easier to port, I think, to other systems, because all you really have to do is rewrite the tile engine and the disk loading routines, and like maybe some of the input routines for like keyboard and whatnot. All of the rest of the code, if it's a 6502 system, all the rest of the code just works. And so with like the Atari and the Apple and the Nintendo version and the Plus4 and all that we've done, it's the person doing the port only has to rewrite like, I want to say like 20-25% of the code. The rest of it just works as is. And then, you've already got the maps, you've already got the game logic, you've already got, all that kind of stuff that's already there for you. So it's not like having to redo a game from scratch, which would be a lot harder, I think. So.
Okay, that's my questions. Thanks.
Hey, Michael, you're up next. Whoops, I'm sorry, I just hit mute on you. Go ahead and unmute yourself again. I apologize.
We still can't hear you, Michael.
Me?
Yeah.
There we go.
Sorry, I didn't know we were going down the list. I really didn't have any questions. I was just sitting here listening in. I just like hearing what you got to say. So you can continue on. If I have any questions, I guess I could probably raise my hand later on.
Alrighty.
Okay, so who's next? Me or?
Daniel.
I think we skipped over Michael Zukowski.
Okay, I have two questions and one request.
Sorry, I'll speak next.
Sorry?
I was just going to say, sorry, I thought I was next. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. So nice to meet you, David. And I'm living also in Poland, in Gdańsk. I'm a member of the retro community here, and also as a member, I am a member in the demosing group called Alter. And the first question is, did you thought about the 16-bit guide? Amiga, Atari ST, that kind of stuff.
I'm not quite sure I understand. Are you asking if I thought about calling myself the 16-bit guy, or are you just asking if I've thought about covering some 16-bit computers?
I know you are 8-bit only. I never seen any material on your YouTube channel about the 16-bit computers. So my question is, did you thought about making some materials about for example, Amiga and 16-bit computers?
Okay. No, actually, I've shown a number of 16-bit and 32-bit computers in my videos. So that's a little bit of a misconception, although admittedly, I don't focus on those machines. I am working on an Amiga related video. I've been working on it for 2 years now. It keeps getting pushed back. But yeah, there will be a Amiga video. And of course, I covered the Amiga in the last video that I guess it was second to last video I put out. Because I was talking about the Pesky Robots port for Amiga, and I've been working on that after I finished with the Plus4 and the 128. I'm now focusing all my attention on the Amiga version to try to help. The guy that's actually doing the coding for it is named Vesa, but I'm trying to help him as much as possible. And so I've been spending hours every day working on the Amiga version of that. So yeah. And I'm trying to get some of my Amigas fixed up because I have like 4 Amigas and none of them work exactly right. They all have problems, and I've been meaning to try to devote some time to repair them, but just finding the time for it is tough. Anyway.
Okay, so the next question is, did you heard about the first smoothly running Doom-like game for the half megabyte RAM Amiga 500?
Yes, I've seen some videos of that. Very impressed with it.
Yes, that's also my colleague from the demosing group, KK. And I have a request, because we are now preparing for the 9 December starting Silly Venture, which is the biggest gathering of the Atari fans probably in the world. So can you send some greetings for us? Silly Venture.
I'm not quite sure what you're asking me.
I'm asking to say some warm words, some greetings to all participants in the Atari Gathering Silly Venture in the 9th December this year.
Okay.
I'm guessing he's asking for a shout out.
Yeah, greets for a demo party.
Yeah, are you asking me to do that in like one of my videos, or just like right now, just like something you're going to
Right
record?
now.
Warm greetings to the Atari meetup on December 9th. Sorry, I can't even remember what it's called.
Silly Venture.
See, I'm not even. It's
Silly
probably
Venture.
It's Silly Venture.
Silly
Venture. Silly Venture.
Okay.
Oh shit! Oh,
thank you.
Something's very funny to somebody.
I think Thomas was having a little bit of a stroke there for a second. Okay, Daniel, you're up now, my friend.
Hello, my name is Daniel. First thing, I just want to say I'm a huge fan of you, David. I've practically watched probably all your videos. You're one of the biggest inspirations to probably me. You helped me basically get my dream job, which is working in IT. One question I've got about your game, I think is it X-Planet, I think it's called, is have you got any plans porting it onto any Amstrad machines? Like the CPC, I think it's called.
That's not PC compatible, is it?
No, it's a Z80 machine.
Not sure.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the Amstrad systems. I know they made some PC compatibles, or at least I think they did, but
yeah, they did.
But yeah, I don't know anything about them. So unless somebody else is going to do the port, no, I'm afraid not.
Just for context for our friends on the other side of the pond, the Amstrad CPC did not make it over to the United States at all. So most people don't even know that those machines exist over here. I do, so who I am, but anyway.
Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Hey, Andrew.
Hello. Hi, David. How are you doing?
All right.
I'm going to go a slightly different way. I'm curious on the keyboard side, and not the ones I normally deal with, but I know you're a great fan of vintage synths and that kind of thing. And I have a Roland D50, and to program it back in the day, you had to get an entirely different piece of kit, which was very expensive to program it. But I know that there are people writing programs now that you can use on modern computers to edit your patches and that kind of thing. And I wondered, first off, if you had to play around with any of that kind of software, and then B, if you have, well then, okay. So that's the end of that question.
If it's not a, I don't know if you're a part of it. I'm actually at a group on Facebook called Crap Keys. And I think that kind of defines it really well. If it's not a crap keyboard, I'm probably not interested in it. And I never really had any of the, well, I won't say never, but rarely have I owned any professional keyboards, even back in the day or today. I've always just played around with, little Casios and Yamahas and stuff that are like consumer things you'd find in like, the department stores and stuff like that. So I have very little experience with anything made by Roland or Korg or any of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm afraid I just don't know much about it.
Fair enough. I had the kind of keyboards you're into back in the day. I got lucky with the D50. I had a friend who was selling it before they got popular again. So I got it for a song.
Alrighty then.
Cheers.
Okay, I know I'm going to slaughter this name, but it's Borgnick.
Yes, hi. Actually, it's Gerard Brohes. I've started some retro writing thanks to David's video a few weeks ago, and I'm trying now to focus more on using that 40 clean not the cream, but the clear one. How long do you think you can use that liquid 40 clean? I've seen people telling that they've been using it for months, provided they keep it in a dark container. Is it your experience also, or do you consider that the H2O2 is actually degrading quite quickly?
Okay, well, actually happened. Hang on a second. I have a bottle of that right here.
Yes.
So my experience is if it stays in the bottle, I don't know, it seems to last for a very long time, if years perhaps. But once you pour it out of the bottle and you start exposing it to UV light, my experience is that within 24 to 36 hours, it is totally inert. Like it doesn't have any power left in it, so to speak. And I just have to dump it out. So.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Daniel.
Hi guys, hey David. I know that demo scene is not as popular in the US as it is in the Europe. And David, would you ever like to write a demo for an 8-bit computer using the experience you have gained so far in writing your programs? And I would also like to thank Gavin for organizing a great meeting. Thank you.
You know, I've thought about writing demos, but I don't do it for a couple of reasons. One, I think about when I watch demos. You know, someone will post a demo on, you know, Facebook or, you know, something like that. I'll click on it. Most of the time, I'm just going to watch a YouTube video of it because I'm too lazy to copy it to my real hardware to watch, you know, a 5-minute demo. I'm going to watch that demo for 5 minutes or however long it is, and then I'm done with it. And I'll never go back to it again. And I feel like if I'm going to spend, you know, 6 months writing something, I want it to be something that people can interact with and something that people can enjoy for, you know, hours, days, or weeks, like, you know, like with the games. And so I just, I'm not that motivated to write a demo. Not only that, and let's be totally honest here, it's really hard to sell a demo, right? And, you know, I do invest, you know, usually 6 to 9 months to develop a game, and I want to be able to sell it to, you know, recoup, you know, some of the time that I've put into that. And so that's another reason too. So, so no, I don't have any plans to write any demos.
Thank you, David.
Okay, David, do you have a suggestion on someone that wants to learn to code in 6502, like what you're doing? I mean, kind of where they would start out and any resources out there that you think are really valuable to people that are trying to learn how to code the 6502?
Someone just asked that like 5 minutes ago. I don't remember who I was talking to, but yeah, I don't really have a great answer for that. You know, there's Facebook groups devoted to all these different platforms. There's a lot of people on there that do coding on these groups, and I would just usually recommend joining one of those groups and asking the group, and there'll be a lot of opinions, and you can just decide which one whose suggestion sounds best fitted to your personality. You know.
How long have you been doing 6502 programming? When did you start?
I started at about 12.
Oh, wow. Vlad, we see you have another question.
Hello. Hello to everybody. I'm first time here, guys. I just discovered this. Great idea. I have a question for David. It's about actually, I'm not sure how to say it. What's your feelings about the IBM PC, the 286? I mean, it's related with the fact that it looks like to me that you're very focused on other type of machines, maybe because it's not 8-bit. or because there is something you don't like it about it. I don't know, because okay, maybe I'm from different generation. I like old computers, but my old computers are not so old. Like I discovered actually retro computers because of you, David. Like I am huge fan. Like I learned a lot about the Commodore 64 and a lot of stuff. But my architecture, the one that I know best, the assembly is x86, the IBM PC, DOS. So I'm wondering, what are you feeling, and do you plan, as a related question, do you plan to port Petsky robots for MS-DOS, to 86?
Well, the x86 platform is it's hard to make an apples to apples comparison. I don't know how to explain this, because the platform existed from like 1981 to like into the 90s, I guess, if you're looking at an MS-DOS as a platform. It really spans so many different computers, and while they're all backwards compatible to a certain extent, it's not just like one computer you can throw out there. And not only that, but there's like so many different brands, and they're all, you had Tandy and AST and Compaq and IBM and Packard Bell and all these different kinds. It's hard to focus on one particular thing. But I will say this, like when I wrote Planet X3, I left out, well, it has it now because Benedict Friesen added it, but originally the game did not have EGA support. And, my reason for that was that I felt like people who are into these computers are either into the very early days where they had like CGA, or they're into like the more modern systems that have like VGA. And I don't really see that many people that seem to be interested in like the 286 era, and systems that had EGA graphics. There doesn't seem to be that much interest in that in-between stage. It's either the really old or the 486 era with VGA. And you can kind of even see that to some extent, like in the laptops. Like, I don't know why, but laptops, it's like they jumped from CGA systems to VGA systems, and they just kind of completely skipped the whole EGA era for some reason. And anyway, so I know I'm probably just kind of rambling here. I'm not making a lot of sense. But also your question wasn't extremely specific either. But I will answer the second part, which was about pesky robots. There is actually somebody working on an MS-DOS port for that now, and it's going to probably look pretty much exactly like the Amiga version. So,
related with that, I like to say another thing, because your games are very good. Like I personally will buy them. I still haven't tried it, but I watch all of your videos, so I get the sensation of what kind of game is the gameplay. And one of the things that I know, you said that it's very complicated to make a game for like modern machines. That's totally true. It takes millions of dollars. Absolutely true. Like I am a software developer, so like it's pretty clear. But there is one thing. There are some people that exactly as you do, they do the exact same kind of games, so retro games for modern machines, even for the Xbox. Like there is a game for Xbox. Yeah, I don't know if I may say the name. Anyway, I'm not sure about it. Anyway, I won't say it. Like, but it's exactly the same era, old school like game, but it runs for Xbox. You can run for Windows. So just want to say that your art, the idea, this kind of gameplay, for me is totally worth even playing on a modern machine, because there are two separate components. One is the challenge to make it on the old machine, which is super cool. I totally understand it. And the other is the artistic value that I personally, I see this value. I mean, for me, you could sell it actually. Even if for like not so much, but for €5 on Steam or something like that, I totally believe that it's feasible because it's cool. Like,
it's possible. Probably the only reason that if it were to succeed, probably the only reason would simply be the reach that I have with my audience, because I've talked to a number of other developers who develop for like iPhone and Android and stuff like that, and they're telling me that it's impossible to sell a game on those platforms now. You have to give it away for free, or people won't even download it, and then you have to charge people like in-game fees,
that's bad. I totally understand. No, and about desktop machines. Yeah.
And I don't even want to get into that kind of stuff. but yeah, I mean, I suppose with the reach of my YouTube channel, I might actually be able to get enough interest to maybe, like you say, sell it for $5, something like that. But the reality is, I don't even know how to code for these modern machines. The last time I did any coding on modern machines, and I say modern, was like probably 15, 16 years ago, and it's all different now. And I don't really feel like learning coding for modern systems.
I get. I totally get it. Just saying that there is I see a huge value. Like for example, I'll be one of the guy that probably buys on the Steam like for $5 because it's just more convenient instead of using an emulator. But there is value in the game per se. That's it. Thank you for answering.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, I got to agree. For $5, I'll buy pretty much anything. I've got a couple of questions that have been sent to me via Messenger, and before we go over to Peter again, this one is with regards to the Amiga port. Are there plans to allow Super Nintendo controller connections to it?
I don't know. I've had a number of conversations with Vesa about that, and one thing he is going to support is the I forget what you call it. It's the little controller that came with the CD32, and apparently it has more buttons on it. I've never actually seen one, so I need to get a hold of one of those. But yeah, apparently it has more buttons on it, and it's something kind of similar to a Nintendo type controller or something like that. And so that is on the plan to support that. Right now, the existing game only plays on the keyboard, but yeah, we want to have some kind of controller support, obviously, for the final version.
Awesome. I got to tell you, I don't know why there's some mental blockage in my head that I just can't get the arrow keys down correctly. That's how I've killed myself a number of times, is walking in the wrong direction.
Are you using the Atari?
Yeah, the Atari, and it's the keyboard itself. I'm so not used to using that old keyboard that, you know, the arrow, the up and down, left and right just aren't where I'm used to. Well, they're not laid out the way the modern keyboards are.
So I have a comment about that, and it's actually, I believe the manual states this as well. The only reason that the arrow keys are even supported at all is because when you run the game in an emulator, it maps those to your regular inverted T on your on your modern keyboard, which is pretty easy to play with. But yeah, they're a nightmare to play with that on the real machine. So I would use the IJKL on the actual Atari if you're going to play it on there. You know, and there is the Super Nintendo controller option as well, but the guy that did that, I don't know if it's available yet. I know he was going to submit that controller as some kind of contest that was supposed to be this year or something, and then after that he was going to try to get it mass produced. But the game does support it. I don't know when that controller will, or that little adapter will be available though, but that would certainly help.
It's just a learning curve for me. And then the second question that I've got, and this kind of relates to what the last person was just asking, has anybody approached you to make Steam versions of this? I mean, you don't want to learn the modern stuff, but I'm sure there's probably somebody out there in the world that could.
Well, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Rebecca Heinemann. She's an old school programmer. She's programmed a lot of Atari games, a lot of Commodore games, like Mule and stuff like that. Racing Destruction Set, a lot of stuff like that. She's real famous for. She lives right here in town. And I went to an Atari meetup, I don't know, months ago, and she was there, and I was showing off Petsky Robots, and she actually thought it was a pretty interesting game. She watched me demonstrate the game on a projector to a small audience, and so she talked to me, and she said she would like to port this game to the Nintendo Switch and Android and iOS and Mac OS and all these things. And she's more than capable. I mean, she's got a literally hundreds of famous games under her belt, so to speak. And she's still active developing today. So I was like, yeah. And so we had an agreement worked out. I talked to her for hours, sent multiple phone calls about it. And she said she's working on it, but I have not heard from her in like 3 or 4 months. So I don't know if she's still working on it. And I've actually sent her an email about 2 weeks ago asking for an update. She didn't answer. So I don't know if she's still working on it or not. I need to get an answer from her. But I've had a couple of other people offer, and I've told them no because I already had somebody working on it. But if she's not working on it, then yeah, we'll probably have somebody else take over for that. So
it kind of reminded me when you were mentioning the difficulties and the challenges of programming for some of the old IBM compatible hardware. I remember back in the day when I worked at Sierra Online, that was one of the challenges that we had, was making sure that these games worked on every piece of equipment. We'd have guys running down to the nearest big town to buy the latest Radio Shack computer that came out, the latest PC that came out, just so we could beta test it on it to make sure it worked. And that was a huge challenge back in the day. So I can understand why you would kind of avoid doing that in development. I don't think that would be very much fun.
Well, and keep in mind, I mean, I wrote Planet X3 a couple of years ago for the PC, and yeah, when I started running that on real hardware, it's like it worked on some systems out of the box, and other systems it just would lock up or crash or have weird behaviors on. And it took a long time to figure out why it didn't work on certain systems. And but with time we eventually got it working on more or less everything out there. but yeah, it's one thing to get it to work in DOSBox, but to get it to work on the real hardware is definitely more challenging.
Yeah, I don't think I'd want to do that if I were you. I'm going to kind of go out of order because the first two with their hands up have already talked once, so I'm going to come back to you guys. But Scott Robinson, you've got your hand up. Do you want to ask David a question?
If I could ever unmute my microphone, then yes, I would love to talk to David for a second. In the interests of full disclosure, I've worked with David on the Commodore 128 port of Petsky Robots. And I just kind of wanted to chime in on a me too on the last thing he was talking about. I don't have like a physical Commodore 128 myself anymore because I lost it in a move a long time ago. And so I had to do all of my development in an emulator, much like David did for DOSBox on Petsky Robots. And that's, I think my question for David, and I think I know the answer already, is for me, the appeal of some of these old platforms, much like modern consoles, is that it is this one stable machine. It has a certain amount of hardware in it, and once you learn how that hardware works, it's great. Whereas, IBM PC and to a similar extent, like Apple II, they were always meant to be so expandable that it's like, okay, well, if you use this one version of the machine with this one card, then yeah, it's really easy to make a game for it. But then suddenly everybody with this really esoteric platform that has a BIOS by who knows what, and different video cards from different manufacturers, it becomes really, really difficult. And I think anyway, the appeal to retro for me is that you could understand exactly what was in a machine, and thus it's a lot easier to support something like that. I mean, so maybe here's the good question. Do you have a lot more support calls for games like Planet X3 than you do for the Commodore 64 version of X2 or the Petsky Robots that work on just one particular platform at a time?
No, I don't. Believe it or not, when you talk about support calls, I don't really get calls, but I do. Well, if I do, I hang up on them and block them immediately because I don't take personal calls on my personal phone. But I do get emails from people who've bought the various games and they can't get them to work. 99 times out of 100, the problem that they're having is they're trying to run it in an emulator and they don't know how to configure the emulator correctly. And DOSBox is probably the worst because with DOSBox, people need to not only understand, hey, I've got to install this program called DOSBox, but they have to figure out that, oh, I have to create like a virtual directory for my C drive, and then I have to map that into DOSBox. Nobody ever seems to know how to do that correctly. Whereas like with the Vice emulator, we give them, like a D64 file or a D71 file. All they got to do is drag and drop it over onto the emulator, and it just works because it's an all-inclusive disk image. although people call them ROMs for some reason, which irritate me to no end. But but the point is, I have far less support issues with the 8-bit stuff like on Commodore or whatnot, because it's kind of a drag and drop thing. And with DOSBox, it requires some configuration. And sometimes I'll help people, but the vast majority of the time, I'm just like, look, your DOSBox is not configured correctly. Go to this group here. Maybe they can help you, because I'm not going to sit there back and forth for hours on end, for a $10 digital download, to spend hours trying to teach somebody how to configure DOSBox. And so anyway, hopefully that answers the question some. But I will point out, and I'll agree with one of the things that Scott just said about the platform. So when you write a game for like a Commodore 64, you know that every Commodore 64 out there in the entire world is exactly the same. More or less. There's very slight differences. You got PAL and NTSC, which that's actually something Scott and I ran into with the 128 version. But more or less, once you get the game working, it's going to work on all of them. And with a PC, with an MS-DOS machine, or even a Windows PC, it's not quite that straightforward. And so that is definitely an appeal.
Okay, Peter, you got another question?
Peter, I cannot hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Right now, I think it's okay. So I have a question, of course, but before that, I would like to do a little explanation of what about my colleagues talked about demo scene and demos for retro computers. The main the situation is that in Central Europe, 20, 30 years ago, we didn't have a commercial market and a lot of piracy and lack of books, and people tried to write demos. It was a kind of education and kind of art market in Poland and other countries around. So that's why here in Poland we have a lot of teams and groups that are trying to make something special, and it's not commercial. That's why my friends asked about demos. But the question is because on the I've heard questions about retro development and modern development, but I think it's something between, because, for example, I believe in modern retro computing, and right now we have here people that are working on FujiNet, that it's possible to write, for example, network games for retro computers, and the question is, what do you think about that? For example, because it's possible also to make a game, and for that it will be working on C64 and Atari, and players could play from different platforms.
Well, this kind of falls under the same question as asking why some of my games don't have 2-player mode. And even before like FujiNet and stuff like that, people ask me, like, take Planet X2. People used to say, well, David, why don't you make a version where you could take 2 Commodore 64s and use like a null modem cable between them and play like a dual player game or something like that? And my answer is, well, I could certainly do that. The trouble is, these machines, these computers are so niche. There's so few people out there that use them, and everybody that uses them is so spread apart. It's, if I were to write a game that's 2-player like that, I'd probably have like 5 customers to buy that game and play it, you know, and and the same with doing the FujiNet. It's like, yeah, there would be a few people out there that would think it's the coolest thing ever, but ultimately I'd probably make like 10 sales if it required FujiNet in order to make it. And when you look at the time that's invested into making a game, you want to reach, you know, the widest audience possible. And you know, even the Atari version itself, just as an example, I mean, I'm still only sold about like 150 copies for Atari, which I don't even think I've broke even. Like, I think I'm still in the hole on the Atari version, and because there's just not that many customers out there. Whereas like with the Commodore version, I've sold like, you know, like close to 2,000 copies. So, you know, I just sometimes just have to do what's good business sense. And if I'm going to invest huge amounts of my time to make something, I want to have, I want to make sure that it's commercially viable. And so that's really what it boils down to.
Yeah, I understand, but I am after 20 years in IT business, and right now I'm moving to venture capital, and we did some analytics about that. And for example, project ZX Spectrum Next, it's more than 10,000 units sold, and we are waiting for Kickstarter, second Kickstarter. And as you said, the team could be 1-2 programmers. And for example, when you sold to the game for ZX Spectrum Next users, it could be good money from that.
I don't know. I don't know how to program for the ZX Spectrum. I don't even know how to program for the Z80 processor. So I'd have to let somebody else do that.
Yeah. Okay. Understand. Thank you.
No problem.
There you go, Peter. There's opportunity for you to port a game. Get on that one. I'm sure David will work with you. Next one, Forrest again. And David, you know, we want to be conscientious of your time. If you've got a hard stop that you've got to hit, by absolutely let us know. You know, I know that these questions are kind of still pouring in and might continue for a little bit. You know, we have had people stick around for up to 3 hours before, but it's totally up to you. You know, we're at your mercy. So if you need to go, make sure and let us know. But in the meantime, Forrest, you got another question?
Yes. Now it's from behalf of the group that I talked about earlier, that as we call it the Achnunim Aktanim. It's translation from Hebrew. It's the little nerds. So the question that he's been asked from, it's just a second. A friend of mine, Yuval, asking about if you still have interest in games from the late 90s, the early 2000s, and if yes, what's your way of playing them?
The only game that I play from that time period is StarCraft. And mostly StarCraft 1. I don't really care as much for StarCraft 2 for a variety of reasons. And I still play StarCraft, but that's about it. I know there was a number of games I played back in the time, and I don't feel they hold up that well. But you know, and I still play Duke Nukem 3D. I know that's from a little earlier period. That's from like the early 90s. But yeah, I just
it will be more likely mid 90s, even if it wasn't been born yet, I think.
Yeah, but I'm just not that into the modern games for a variety of reasons. One problem is, to be completely frank about it, I don't have a lot of time to play games these days. And so when I want to sit down and play a game, which is rare, I'm either going to pick a game I already know how to play because I don't want to take the time to learn to play a new game, or I want to pick something that is really easy to learn, something that's, I can learn in 10 minutes, right? A lot of these modern games, I would have to spend hours to figure out, how to play. So.
And if I will be a bit more specific, what's your suggestions about how to play those games a bit, like type of cards or any of those stuff? What will be your preferred way if you will choose to?
I don't really have a good answer for that because, like I said, the only game I play, or the only two games I play from the 90s these days, is Duke Nukem 3D and StarCraft, and you can play both of those on modern computers because they have versions now that will run on Windows 10.
Yeah, compatible with any new architectures.
Yeah, so that's what I do. So I don't really have a good answer for that.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hey, I'm going to go out of order again here. John, you've been waiting patiently.
And Kat, yes, there's I'm amused. No, thank you, and I enjoyed this this meeting. And what I wondered, you already now said twice, once for the x86 and the other time for the Z80, that you don't know how to program that, and you stick to the 6502. You really program low level, or you don't use a compiler which you could cross compile to other platforms?
I'm sorry, I don't really understand what you're asking.
Okay, now you said that you only program for the 6502, and that you don't know how to program for the Z80 and the x86.
I do program for x86.
Oh, sorry. That's my fault then. No, but I wondered, do you really program in low-level assembly code for the 6502, or do you use a cross compiler?
Well, I use a cross compiler, but I'm writing in assembly code. I'm not writing in C and then having it compiled to 6502. I'm writing in 6502 on a modern machine.
And
then I guess a cross assembler would probably be the more accurate term to use. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Michael Gee, you got your hand up there, buddy.
Thanks. Yeah, I do have a question. So you're a Commodore guy. I've got a few Commodores. I got a Commodore 128 that I just fixed up, but I've got it still open because I'm thinking about considering some sort of, I think there's like Jiffy DOS or something like that. But I'm, because the Commodore loads so slowly, I'm wondering what you suggest for kind of general upgrades for your Commodore hardware. What do you suggest, like, for fast load or any extending it to beyond its capabilities?
I don't usually do any of that. I will admit, if I'm running a Commodore 64, I do use a fast load cartridge. And I prefer the modern one that's made by the Future was 8-bit because it does also support the SD to IEC,
cool,
which is handy. But that's it. That's about all the upgrading I do. Obviously, if you're using the Commodore 128, then you have some of those features already. But like Pesky Robots loads really fast on a Commodore 128 without any kind of upgrades. But yeah, I like to keep the systems as stock as possible.
Okay. And I'm sorry, what was that fast load that you said?
It's just called fast load, EPYX, or some people call it Epix fast load.
Oh, just the old Epix cartridge?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you said there was an updated version of it.
Well, they do. The Future was 8-bit is selling an updated version of that, but it's basically the same thing. But I think they've added SD to IEC support on there.
Oh.
So it loads fast from SD cards now.
Sweet. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Thank you very much.
Some of my other friends, they've got like 1541 Ultimates and a variety of other types of add-ons like that. But I don't know. That's not what I use. So
Yeah. Well, that's what I was looking for, something like a more modern day storage. I haven't even purchased one yet. I mean, I was even going to make one because I think you can make one out of one of the Raspberry Pis and stuff. So, but it's one of those things. It's like you said, you got so little time to look things up, and my Commodores are kind of over here. My Taris are out, but I do plan to have them out at some point in time, and would like to have some sort of device I can load all these games off of and play, and not sit around for hours and wait for them to load. So, because I've had experience with Commodores in the past, and they do load quite slow. So
yeah, that is true.
Okay, David, we got a question in the chat, and Eric is asking, do we have a release date for Pepsi robots for the NES?
No, I don't set release dates. It's on anything. It's just done when it's done. And, that's one of the benefits of not being in a big commercial environment. I don't have any particular deadlines to meet or anything like that. And that means that hopefully that means that when it's done right. And keep in mind that like with an NES cartridge, it's not like I'm going to send you a over the air update, to fix a bug or something we find. So we want to make sure it's right before it's done. And, but, I can estimate when it'll be done. Right now, the game is probably 85-90% done. And so, I'm kind of hopeful that it'll be done in the next 2-3 months. But even when it's done, we are still struggling to figure out how to manufacture cartridges for the Nintendo. So on any kind of scale and, at a reasonable price. And that's something I'll probably go into in a video at some point, showing the various struggles involved in that. And so even if the game were done today, I'm not sure when distribution could actually begin, because we're still struggling with that issue.
Yeah, I understand the issues with hardware development. That's generally what I do, is I create or build a lot of hardware for the Atari 8-bits, and it can be challenging. And
Yeah.
cartridges
Well, the
are no
Nintendo
different.
cartridges, they require this MMC. Well, I mean, they don't require it, but for any game of any complexity, you're going to require a mapper chip. And those are extremely difficult to find in any kind of quantity that actually works. We've looked into getting some on Alibaba and whatnot, but the success rate on them is like 50% are dead and 50% work. And if you're paying, $10 a chip, then it's really more like $20 a chip if half of them are bad. And, ideally we need to, I want to keep the cost of the cartridge, like if at all possible, under $50. And, we're currently looking at bills of materials like as high as $30 just for the parts to build it, without even actually like doing any labor to assemble them yet, And so we actually did find a CPLD replacement for the mapper. So that's going to hopefully bring the price down a little bit. I mean, ultimately,
we wear masks. The national news.
what the heck is that?
Sorry about that. Somebody came in unmuted.
Oh. So anyway, that's been a big challenge for the NES. And what I'd love to see is some kind of like all-in-one like FPGA or something where you could just like load the code in and it handles the RAM and the ROM and the mapper and all that kind of stuff for like $10 or something. And I wouldn't be surprised if somebody has something like that, but we haven't been able to find any kind of open source or even something you could license that to do something like that. So we're having to build the cartridge the old school way, where you have discrete chips for RAM and ROM and the mapper and the little lockout chip that NES used and all that kind of stuff. So it's a pain. It's a big pain. I don't know where Gavin went. I guess since I'm stuck being the only one talking, I'll just go on to say that, I've had a lot of emails from people telling me about this MMC5 mapper for the NES, which can apparently give us more color control, which would solve our grayscale problem. And of course, I already knew about this. It's not news to me or anything, but people keep emailing me about it. But the problem I keep replying to all those emails is, show me where I can find that mapper chip in any quantity. Because they're like, oh yeah, you can pull it out of like a Super Mario 3 cartridge or something like that. I'm like, well, that's great. Now tell me how to make 500 of them or 5,000 of them, because, I can't just grab a whole bunch of Super Mario 3 cartridges and desolder them out of there. Nobody's making them, nobody's selling them, and I can't even find like a CPLD or FPGA replacement for such a thing. So anyway, yeah. So I'll hand it back to Gavin now.
Nikolai, go ahead. Sorry about that. Somebody's at the door.
Yeah, thank you again. About portability, being able to have your code working on other Commodores. Well, my Commodore has a Danish keyboard. It has some letters we use in the Danish alphabet, and to make that work, the char ROM chip and the kernel chip has been replaced with modified one. Could that cause problems if I were to write a code and want to run it on a Commodore, which was just like, pure standard English right from a factory?
I don't think, like if your game uses the joystick, I don't think it would be an issue at all. If your game uses the keyboard, it might be an issue, but excuse me. With Pesky Robots, one of the things that I did was in the, excuse me, there's an option to redefine your keys. So even if your keyboard's a little different from everybody else's, you can just go in there and say, hey, I want to use this for the up key, this for the down key, whatever. So whatever your keyboard has, you can make it work by having that option. So that's another way of dealing with that.
Yes, and about to the guy who asked about modern hardware, I can recommend the Ultimate 2 Plus, and you can see we have a modern USB thumb drive stuck in it, and I can use that to transfer file between my Commodore and a modern PC. They are not inexpensive, but they are worthwhile. It's pretty easy to use, and that would be all for me. Thank you.
I would like to point out too that FujiNet will be coming to the Commodore machines soon enough.
Oh, very nice.
I was just going to say the Ultimate 2 Plus kind of looks like an S drive for the Atari. Okay, was there any other questions that people have out there? Oh, it's a cartridge. I gotcha.
Yes, you plug it in. You plug it in here. Yeah.
Nice.
And it has a fast loader built in.
All right, Gavin, I think I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Obviously, everybody knows how to get a hold of me if they have any, questions or anything.
Absolutely. David, really appreciate the time. I know that you are an extremely busy guy between YouTube and packaging up products and shipping and coming up with new stuff. So I really, really appreciate the time you spent with us today. An hour and a half is a great amount of time out of your day. And thank your wife as well for allowing us to have some time, because I'm sure that she could have used it as well. So thank you very much for joining us, David. And again, thank you for sending this little frustrating gem. I'm going to continue playing it out in the garage and getting crushed by trash compactors and zapped by robots left and right. I love it. I think I'm also going to order the other one for the MS-DOS and play it in DOSBox, because that one, I saw you demo in it quite a while ago on your channel and thought it looked like a fun game too. So I appreciate it, David. Thank you again for your time, and hope we can do it again sometime when you come up with something new. We're happy to try to get the word out for you and share it with the community. So thank you very much.
All right, no problem. See you later.
Okay, and for the rest of you that would like to stick around for a few minutes, Thomas has agreed, I guess he was voluntold, that he could talk a little bit about the Coleco Atom version of FujiNet that he's been working on, and another plea for help. We've got a lot of people from around the world out there really could use some help with the FujiNet project. If any of you hardware people are so inclined, we're trying to bring FujiNet to Commodore, Amiga, or the Atom, as well as the Apple, the old Apple II line of computers. And I know, Thomas could desperately use some help from those of you that are gifted in some of these other platforms. So if you want to stick around for a few minutes, we can hear from Thomas and share some of his thoughts and ideas of what's going on.
Okay. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, you're loud and clear.
Yeah, I can definitely tell that from earlier. Sorry about that. I was laughing my ass off and did not realize I was unmuted. Okay, so essentially, ColecoVision, FujiNet for Atom. This work started in earnest in October after we were able to successfully take and do the hardware bring up at VCF East. As it happened at VCF East, Jeff Pete Meyer had come up from Maryland to help debug the hardware schematic that Moswald had put together for this particular target. And I was having a bit difficult time basically breadboarding everything together and making it, getting it working. And it turned out there needed to be additional work on the hardware that needed to be debugged. And so as luck would have it, two things happened at VCF East which really made that possible. The first was essentially noticing, Jeff noticing that there was an oscilloscope for sale on the machine at one of the tables across from us. So for like $40. So Jeff went, picked up that oscilloscope, brought it over to the table and hooked it up. And as we were, and that brings us to the second point, as we were hooking it up and calibrating the oscilloscope, there was a kid, he could not have been more than 23 or 24 years old, came by the booth, noticing we were tweaking on the oscilloscope, started asking some very pointed questions, the kind of questions that you ask when this is your bread and butter and you do this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in your sleep. So within about 10, 15 minutes, he starts helping us debug the circuit, and with a few resistor changes and a few little bits and pieces of work on the oscilloscope, we tweak it and we're able to get the system to boot up. And that's when all of the work for ColecoVision for the Atom version of FujiNet started in earnest. And so work has been progressing warp speed since October. Now, as with the Atari version, the Atom version has the configuration program entirely in the flash memory, and it boots up whenever you take and turn the Atom on, or when you go into a reset. And you're presented with a program very much like the configuration program for the Atari, except this one's very well fitted for the Atom in that it uses it takes advantage of the smart keys and the smart key UI that Coleco had kind of laid out for a number of their first party bits of software. And of course, I mean, as we can see, it's mostly working here. There are some interesting bugs that have come across. Actually, let me go ahead and just completely reboot the system here. This guy's been running for a little bit. The biggest challenge that I'm dealing with right now mostly has to do with getting the bus timing correct and making sure that everything works as expected. As before, we have the concept of host slots, which are hosts that you can pull things in from, that you can pull disk images in and mount them into disk slots. The protocol is on the Atari is also TNFS here. And we'll go ahead and, as an example here, we're going to take and boot a copy of Donkey Kong Jr. from the cloud here. Currently, digital data pack images, disk images in the Atom format, and cartridges in ROM format are also supported. They can go into the games folder here. And it's worth noting that none of this is optimized right now. The whole point of this particular phase of development is to get everything working as best as we can, and then work on making all the network communications, the protocols, etc., as fast as we possibly can and as efficient as we possibly can. Since we want to take and just boot this, we don't have to go through the process of assigning this particular slot to drive slot 1 and going through all of that. We can literally just press the 6 key to take and boot. And within a few moments, we'll see that it takes and comes up to boot Donkey Kong Jr. here directly off of the network. I wanted to show some of the other bits and pieces, but as luck would have it, I'm currently in the middle right now of drastically altering how the FujiNet handles its protocol negotiations so that it can handle dealing with requests such as status requests and whatnot while the network is off doing network fetches and the like. And as such, things are in a very unstable state. But even with that, we'll find here that everything is proceeding roughly about at the same speed as it took for us to get the initial versions of the Atari 8-bit versions of FujiNet online as well. I guess I will take and end this particular just status update here with the mention that as of this morning, Jeff Pietmeyer, who helped me do the Bring Up at VCF East, has now started working on the Apple II version of the FujiNet, which will use the Smart Port. And he's managed to get the first bits of data coming in across the logic analyzer so we can start dealing with analyzing the Smart Port protocol in earnest and build the bus interface for the Smart Port. I've already had a number of people asking questions on the Apple II version as to why we went with the Smart Port, and the answer is that's the one we could work on right now immediately, as building a card version would actually require us to have to do research into how to interface an ESP32 to a parallel bus. So with that, I mean, that's pretty much all the prepared material I had working here. I wanted to show more, but like I said, because I'm working so much underneath the hood, lots of things that I had shown in previous videos are currently broken while I take and rework some of the core code. So with that, does anybody have any questions?
Thomas, this is Jason. Nice work as always. I'm curious why you decided to go with the Atom first instead of Apple and Commodore.
Well, as luck would have it, this was the piece of hardware I could quickly get my hands on. And as with the Atari, the FujiNet ultimately started as a promise, as the fulfillment of a promise to bring connectivity, a connectivity solution to the Atari 8-bits that didn't suck. And just like the Atari 8-bit, the Atom was in serious need of such a connectivity solution. And given that the Coleco Atom had a serial bus that was extremely extensible and well supported by the operating system, it made sense for me to connect the dots in this way with the opportunity that I would have access to the hardware. So it's more of a why not. Like I said, my ability to work on these different platforms mostly has to do with the fact of, can I borrow the hardware for X amount of time? Do I have all the bits and pieces that I need to do the operating system level integration? And can those of us working on the hardware take and build enough of a working circuit so that I can do the firmware work?
Hey, Michael E., you gonna ask Tom a question?
Yeah. So since you mentioned it in the chat, when is the FujiNet going to be out for the Commodore? Since now you got my interest in it.
That's going to be interesting. I don't have a firm release date set there because, like I said, the work on that started roughly about 4.5-5 months ago, and it's been progressing at a pretty steady pace.
mostly the work has been happening outside of the FujiNet code base, but now everything that the guy who's been working on it has gotten something stable. He's now folding that in, so I'll be able to take and give a better idea on that in the next couple of months.
Awesome, thank you.
The plus side is, even if he develops this, we can't get the hardware for it anyway. So, with the supply chain issues we're having right now, it's becoming pretty problematic to build anything. I've been trying to get Jürgen to send me more of his amazing products to sell, and he's having a hell of a time with supply chain. I know I'm having a hell of a problem with supply chain, and I'm getting lazier where I'm willing to put fewer and fewer components on by hand. So I guess this is a good thing. It gives Thomas and the team a little bit of time to work on the software side, since even if they do finish it, it's probably going to be challenging in the near future to build any of these new devices.
Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that when I went out to look at the Ultimate 2, when it was mentioned, they're out of them right now too. So supply chain is a serious problem.
Yes.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane right now. I started building and selling the SCSI to Pi adapter for the Macs, and trying to get some of the components for that was hard. And I broke down and I got the chips straight from Texas Instruments themselves. I didn't realize that they would sell directly to a little guy like me, but I got a few $1,000s worth of chips from TI directly, and I'm able to get those where I'm able to get the PCBs done easily. It's just filling the components, and the ESPs are like I said, they're challenging up and down. I can get the Rover B, the E's I can't get, and the USB controller has been a real pain in the ass to try to get right now too. So,
yeah,
I work in the logistics industry, and they showed an image from 2 years ago, 2019, I think, of the port in LA, and then now, and it was like ships are coming in now, no problem. Now they're just sitting out there. There's like 80 some container ships just waiting to go in a port. So there's stuff there. It's just it's taking forever to get offloaded. So
yeah, but that's just on our side. Most of the components I'm getting directly from China, and they don't have them. That's the problem that I'm seeing is the manufacturers themselves don't have the components. So it's not getting in here, because DHL is how I get all my stuff from China, and I get it here in 2 or 3 days. But they don't have the stuff. It's and they have no ETA on when they're going to have the stuff. So.
Wow.
And I'm sure that's worldwide. I've been trying to get Poke Max. I want to carry those in Vintage Computer Center, and he just laughs at me. He goes, "No, I can't get the components. I can't build them." So far, Lothric hasn't had much of a problem, and everything I've ordered from him in quantity, he's gotten to me relatively quickly. He just installed a $15,000 pick and place machine to try to keep up with production, but so far he hasn't had too much supply chain issues. But it's difficult right now to get hardware.
Yeah, it's absolutely true, because all I need was a 33 ohm resistor to complete my Atom interface, and I can't get it for 12 weeks.
That's insane. A resistor shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. Well, if I need to, I have this box of thousands of resistors here. I guess I can take and load it up on a trebuchet and send it your direction.
That's what we need for Canada.
Anybody else working on anything cool and exciting out there in the community around the world?
Well, I'm sorry that I didn't raise a hand because I forgot where's the button. Currently in our, all right, I'm sorry. I saw that Andrew now may raise his hand, so I will give him.
Go ahead, Forrest.
You go ahead, I'll wait.
All right, I'm currently working on a floppy controller to USB Type-C. It's, well, currently, because of all the wide shortage also here, me and my friends decided that it might be a good idea to try to build that controller from to take like old motherboards that we sometimes found like in the garbage, and try to like we are really in the early stages of this project. So we what we try to achieve is like currently most of the students' laptops over here are already Type C, and it's really pain to get stuff like floppy drives and floppy disks that to actually get software that has been intended to use back then. And we can't find computers that are currently still working or work anywhere. So that's currently the project. We're just like going around our tails to find how we will actually build it.
Awesome. I know Israel has got some pretty amazing technical brains there. I've dealt with a few people from Israel that have had some really cool projects coming out of Israel. So keep it going for us. You know, it's nice to see someone of your age that's interested in doing this type of thing. So we're glad to have you here.
And in our small group, we have people that are even younger than me. I think the youngest one is around 14. So, and it's you most likely know about the high tech people, not the old kind of that, but we're still sometimes even we're trying to think how to create transistors by ourselves, but that's just like a small joke in the group. So yeah,
That's awesome.
thank you.
That's awesome. Keep it up. Andrew, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to plug all of the stuff I do. Feel free to mute me if I go on too long.
Hey, no one goes on as long as Thomas, Andrew, so you'll be okay.
Cool. So just a little bit of background. I got back into coding after I graduated from a liberal arts degree in the 1990s. And back in the day, I never really got much past basic. But after I graduated, I was kind of bored and emulation was becoming a thing. And so I taught myself Z80 assembly language, mainly to work around the limitations of the basic stuff that I'd been working on. So I kind of like went from there and I got involved in the emulation community, and I did a lot of stuff with the Spectrum for a lot of years. Probably like my biggest success was coming up with the ULA Plus palette enhancement. Because the Spectrum had a fairly limited set of colors, but with this enhancement, you can actually take an FPGA chip and place it in place of the old ULA chip and get more colors on your original Spectrum. And this was sort of part of a design that I'd worked with a Polish colleague of mine on for a sort of like a new machine. But anyway, it was 20 years ago, and it was before that kind of thing was really viable. So that never really took off, but the color part did quite well. And then through that as well, I've worked on creating my own open source version of the Spectrum firmware. And that's been around for over a decade now. Nobody uses it because Comcast doesn't sue anybody who uses the original one, but it's there if people want to do something with it. And having put 20 years into coding all of this stuff and going, Spectrum people really just want to play the old games, I thought, well, I got to do something else with this. So one of the things that happened was a group in Spain created an FPGA recreation of the Spectrum, but they put a lot of extra features into it. And I thought, well, why don't I take this as a starting point? Because it included pretty much everything I designed for my old machine. I was like, okay, so let's just say this is the hardware. Why don't I write some new firmware for this that's really geared to getting the most out of it? So I could make it a bit more modern. It's sort of, I guess it's in that kind of, it's not really 16-bit, but it's not really 8-bit either. So sort of like the C65 or the MSX Turbo R, maybe a little bit of Apple II GS. So you're still booting up into BASIC, but it's, you know, you've got an integrated disk system and that kind of thing. And so one of the things that I got to do for it was to come up with a keyboard, which I had produced in America by WAS Keyboards. And I went with them because they still do PS2. And so if you look at it, you'll see it's sort of, it's a bit Amiga 1200 inspired. I've got the control key where it should be. It's kind of Unixy. But that plugs into the FPGA device through PS2, and you can use that. There's a bit of Atari inspiration as well, in that I've made the function keys the same color as the case to kind of hide them a bit. And I've just been playing around with that really, but trying to come up with something that's very approachable, because and through that I got to work on the Mega 65 keyboard, and I got to work on the Deluxe Commander X16 keyboard. So what I'm trying to do with my project is for all of those people who had a computer that had a Microsoft Basic, or all of those people that had a computer with a Z80 processor, to try and give them a next generation system to play with, because most of those devices are a lot more niche than the Commodore 64. I mean, the Commodore 65 is pretty niche, but I actually think the Mega 65 is going to do much bigger numbers than the rest of the team. But so my starting point was the TS1000 Basic, but I've changed the syntax to make it much more Microsofty, and it's not token entry anymore. It's quite normal. All of the disk commands are there. So if you're familiar with Microsoft Basic from the DOS era, that all works as well. The hardware is open source because the Spanish team that created it, they provided all the files, so you can build your own boards, or there are multiple vendors that will sell you the board. Long term, I'm hoping to actually put together something that's professionally produced to a standard that it could be sold on Amazon. But as you say, with the current supply side problems, that's just parked for now. The operating system is reverse engineered, but it works. So that's open source, and then the firmware and the software is all open source as well. So the most recent thing I've been doing is just doing some demo coding. I've ported the Boeing ball from the Amiga, but I had to cheat because I don't have any of the additional hardware that I want to put in the FPGA core, so it's just hand animated. And anyway, so the project is the Chloe project, and I think if you search Vintage is the New Old and just put Chloe in there, you can find a link to it there if anybody is interested in it.
Hey, can you post a link in the chat for us, Andrew?
Yeah, sure. So I have a Patreon, which I think I've got about 12 sponsors, but most of the content is, I kind of just open it up to everybody a month after it goes out. So yeah, I'd be very happy to share that.
Yeah, please do. You know, don't feel bashful about plugging anything anybody's working on. That's kind of what this is for. It's not, you know, I host it and I have Vintage Computer Center, but it's not a Vintage Computer Center exclusive sales pitch type of meeting. You know, anybody can come in here and share what they're working on, because it's, you know, I don't know what motivates you, but the reason why I do what I do is for the community. I absolutely love this community. I love to see, you know, people, you know, like our young friend here from Israel that are, you know, this kid wasn't alive when this stuff was developed, and it's awesome to see that he's using it. You know, it kind of warms my heart. I've got a garage full of vintage arcade cabinets, and before COVID had opened up, we had just moved into this house, and I had the garage open. I had probably 15 neighborhood kids coming over playing on the arcade, and by kids I mean like 12, 13, 15 years old. And I'm asking them, it's like, why do you guys want to play this old junk? You've got to have Xboxes and PlayStations and all that stuff. They had a blast. So that's why I do this. I do this for everybody to have an even shot at sharing what they're doing. I welcome anybody to come here and share their projects, because it's of value to all of us. And, you know, if you can make a couple of dollars on it, then I fully support those, because I want to see you continue development. You know, the gentleman who did the Rascuzzy, when I approached him, because it was an open source project, and I approached him saying, I want to build these and sell these on my website, and I want to pay you for it. And I remember the first month when I sent him money, he's like, I can't believe you're serious. He goes, nobody pays me for this. They just do it and, you know, do whatever they want with it. And I support the community. If we can help each other out and encourage more people to get back into this and develop new things, I'm all for it. So absolutely, thank you for sharing the Patreon link, Andrew, and I'll definitely go take a look at it. It sounds pretty interesting. What you're
I'll
doing.
add one more thing as well, because one thing I am trying to do with this, because it's not derived from any historic system, is to make it something that could kind of just keep on going. And one way I'm trying to make it accessible is by baking internationalization and localization into it. So I've got 8-bit character set support, and I've had a lot of help from a charitable organization in California called Translation Commons. So we're translated into about 20 languages now just for the system messages. And we've got character support for anything that you can do in 8 bits. So if it's more than 256 characters, because of the way the display works, Vietnamese might be possible, but non-Western scripts like Chinese, for instance, that's going to be trickier. I'm hoping to get Arabic and Hebrew in there, but there's some more constraints on the screen modes for that, because the high-res screen mode at the moment is so low res that you wouldn't actually be able to do it at a resolution that you could read it. But that's there. So I mean, if anybody is interested in just taking a look and seeing if it's in their language or not, and if not, volunteers are very, very welcome. You'll get a name credit at least.
Awesome. Jason, how's your new digs down there in beautiful Southern California? It looks like you're at least settled in a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Gavin. Yeah, the move went well. For those of you who don't know, I just moved to Los Angeles last month, renting an apartment temporarily, hopefully buy a house next year. So all my Atari stuff, all my retro computing stuff is boxed up and in storage, and will be unpacked when I finally get a house, which could be a year, could be, with LA prices, could be a couple of years. So we'll see. But so anyway, I haven't been able to do too many Atari projects. If you don't know, I run the Atari Projects website, atariprojects.org. The last thing I did was play Prince of Persia, which, if you haven't tried it, is a very, very impressive game for the Atari. And but what I did want to share was just a quick story. I went to a Commodore user group, since we're on the topic of Commodore today. A couple of weeks ago, went to this user group meetup. It was a 2-day event in the Valley here, not far away, over in Burbank. And I went there on Sunday, and I think the bigger crowd was on Saturday. There were about a dozen people there, and they were doing demos, and they had all the different Commodore set up. It was a really nice event. I stayed for about 2 hours, and I was getting ready to leave, and this elderly couple shows up, and they came with a carload of Commodore stuff that they were looking to get rid of. And so we all went out and unloaded their car. They had 6 suitcases of software. They had disk drives, they had C64s, they had a box of joysticks and all kinds of stuff. It was absolutely insane. So we grabbed all this stuff and brought it in. It took up 2 big tables. It's just a mountain of stuff. And the 12 of us that were there just had a feeding frenzy on this couple stuff. Now, they were there to make money, but what was interesting is they're from Northridge, California, in the Valley, and they're retired now. But back in the 80s, they had set up a learning center for teaching programming on the C64, and ran a little store as well. So they had tons of software that was new in the shrink wrap. So I got a couple things. This is a brand new shrink wrapped fast load cartridge for the C64, which you need because the 1541 disk drive is so insanely slow. But what I was really happy to get, I got a sealed 4th cartridge, which is pretty rare. In fact, I haven't even seen these come up on eBay. This is brand new, sealed in the box. 4th card. I bought this for 20 bucks from them. And I got I didn't really need it, but why not? I got another C64, which is like absolutely like new. It doesn't even have a smudge on it. So anyway, it was I was getting a little bored, and this couple showed up, and it was just an amazing haul of stuff. I wish I could have bought more, but I think my wife would kill me if I did. But anyway, it was fun.
It was worth to move to Los Angeles.
I would have much preferred a haul of Atari stuff like that, but I'm not a big Commodore guy, but I enjoyed grabbing a couple things.
Well, I hope if you find a big haul of Atari stuff, you let me know. I'm not too far from you, obviously.
Well, some of you may remember Bill Lang telling this story about a couple up in New England, in the Northeast, in New Jersey, that had an entire basement full of 8-bit and some 16-bit stuff. And they ran a store back in the 80s. And when they closed down their store, they put all this stuff in the basement, and it sat there all these years. And then the wife decided it was time to get rid of it. And this was during the pandemic. I think this was the first summer of the pandemic. They decided, and anybody who felt safe to do so, Bill went there and a couple other people went there, and they just picked through brand new inboxes, printers, computers, software. It was amazing. I didn't get to go. I was a little too afraid to go out in the first few months of the pandemic, but that was insane. Bill Lang has pictures of it.
Why can't I ever find big holes like that? I mean, I did meet a guy a couple of years ago here in Fresno that found me on Facebook, and he was an ex-Atari employee who was in his, I think he's 85 or 86 years old now, and he ended up giving me his collection, and it was, you know, pretty awesome. I got a whole bunch of Atari 800 keyboards and, you know, a couple of the systems, but I want one of those big holes. I need to find a big hole somewhere. And, you know, and everybody found out my damn secret, which was shopgoodwill.com. It's like, you know, y'all killed me on there. I was making or getting some really good deals on that Shop Goodwill website for Atari, and then apparently the community found out about it too. And, you know, I'm looking for an Amiga right now, and I'm having a hell of a time finding one of those. But, you know, I miss out on all these things.
What I did when I was in Philadelphia is I put ads in the local newspaper, you know, the local, not even the city newspaper, but, you know, I forget what it was called, but anyway, you know, when people are looking for garage sales and stuff like that. And so I would run ads in there that I was looking for Atari stuff. And I got 5 or 6 people contact me with, you know, not huge collections, but, you know, computers, software, peripherals. I picked up some really nice stuff that way, you know, really cheap.
That's what I used to do. I used Craigslist for like finding arcade cabinets, but it seems like everybody's doing that now. So you've got, you know, sell your old computer equipment for cash ads all over the place on Craigslist. And unfortunately, some of these people I run into think that, you know, Atari 130XE is worth $1,000 when, you know, it's not. But you know, every once in a while you'll find somebody that's selling it for a fair price, or, you know, somebody that's getting rid of their passed away parents or grandparents' collection that they have no interest in keeping.
Yeah, I agree. Goodwill and Craigslist, and, you know, they're just not as fruitful as they used to be.
So anybody else have anything they'd like to share with us and tell us what you're working on? Or
If the only thing I would point out, and I pointed this out before, for anybody who wants to understand, who wants to help out with FujiNet, and who definitely wants to help out with FujiNet, I will bend over backwards, literally teaching how every single part of it works, all the way down to the firmware.
And I've seen him bend over backwards, so he's not joking.
So basically, I love showing people how this works, and I love it when people can take and contribute. We've had some wonderful contributions in this way, because people have jumped in and literally thought, well, how hard could this be? So anyway, the offer is always open, and that extends to all of the targets. So if you want to help out with the bring up of any of these FujiNet targets, please jump in. Just jump in.
Thomas, I will join you. I'm finishing one VC deal, one VC transaction, and I will have more time for such things. And right now I'm learning and sharing some code snippets in action on Atari 8-bit home programming fan page, something like this. So I am about
I'm going to really start pushing out to the Apple community, because I really would like to see FujiNet that doesn't require a hard to source middle equipment. You know, that's what's so awesome about FujiNet with the Atari, is there's nothing else I got to put in between it. I can plug it straight into the Atari, and I don't need to find some old vintage crap that I can't find anymore. So,
well, okay. For that, yes, and for that, the only thing I will say here, we did the smart port version of the FujiNet because that's what we could take and bootstrap as quickly as we can to get to as many different machines as we possibly could. Now, as far as adding smart port to a machine that doesn't have it, you've got several different options there, all of which are widely available. You can put soft SP. If you have a Super Serial card, you can put the soft SP ROM on the Super Serial card. And the guy who's working on the Yellowstone Lyron card is going through beta testing right now. That will be in production shortly. So that's another possibility there as well. So it's the ability to take and add smart port onto an existing Apple II machine is actually pretty. The possibilities for that have opened up a bunch in just the last few months alone. So the timing on this could not have been better.
I'll trust you. I mean, I've yet to crack out my Apple II Plus, so that's, you know, the one thing I'm excited about is the Apple and the Commodore. So
I will point out that the person who's working on the Apple II FujiNet right now, Jeff Pietmeyer, his machine is literally one of the Apple II Pluses that Moswald had. So that's what he's using to develop on. He has a Super Serial card that he's lobotomized the ROM off of and popped the soft SP. It lobotomizes the Super Serial card, but you really don't need it after this. So it just uses the ROM space so it can load the smart port code. That's the weird, interesting thing about smart port that's not immediately evident. It is literally, if you know anything about how the Apple Disc II controller works in the first place, 99% of it is software. And the only real, and even the reading of encoded data is literally done with a 256 byte PROM and a couple of latches that form a finite state machine. The disk controller design is ridiculously clever. And SmartPort takes the Disk 2 controller design and extends the living crap out of it in software to add a generic device interface. And ProDOS latches onto that to attach, virtual devices. So,
well, if I could mention the Vintnerd YouTube channel I've been working on.
No. Yeah. Okay.
No.
Hey, Thomas, he put a sticker on his mug, so we got to cut him some slack, right?
Oh, anyways.
Now, if I wanted to drink with the right hand.
Oy vey.
And the Vintnerd actually, my wife Mickey came up with the name beginning of the year because we like red wine and there's Vintner, but vintage nerd. So you never know if this is coffee or red wine. It's given the last 20 months, you just you never know.
Time of day means nothing anymore.
Right. It's Blur's Day, right?
Yeah.
So I've got a couple, half a dozen videos up now in the last few months, and just crossed over 100 subscribers this weekend.
Woohoo! Now you can name your channel with a good URL.
Pardon?
Now you can use the vanity URL for YouTube.
Yes. Once they unlock it, because I don't know if there's a manual process or a double checking, but it has not shown itself yet on the.
It takes a couple of weeks.
Yeah. So
they want to make sure you stay over 100. They don't want to be sitting there flopping up and down between 100 and 99. So
yeah, I think it's like 106 right now.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's been fun, and Thomas, obviously, he and I chatted or messaged, still working on a FujiNet video. So what I find funny is that it's a moving target. What do I talk about Coleco now? Do I just focus on the Atari? What functions has it added that I haven't realized yet? So that's one thing I love about the FujiNet is it's very active right now. And mine's right up here. This is not a green screen, as Gavin thought. I can knock all this off over in one moment. So.
Well, like I said, this really the core functions of FujiNet really haven't changed. We're still doing the same things: virtual disk, virtual printer. Virtual, but it's now we're just trying to bring it over. The goal is to bring it to every single 8-bit computer and console out there. And once we get a generic bus interface worked out so we can start embedding the thing onto cartridges and the like, then yeah, that's going to be doable.
Well, with the multiplayer games I've seen people are working on now, that actually would be interesting to play in with what the 8-bit guy said earlier. He wouldn't make a multiplayer game because you got to get two Commodores together. But now if they all had FujiNets.
Yes, that's the deal.
Yeah, but for example, Bociano works on a multiplayer game on Atari, for Atari. So I could say that it would be some kind of game like, for example, Advance Wars on Game Boy Advance. Something like this, if you know that game.
I don't myself, no.
This kind of war game, tournament war game, something like this.
Okay.
What's the state of the FujiNet 1.6? I know it's been out there for a while, and 1.5 has been being built. But any new changes to that one, or any plans of getting that thing released?
I can't speak for Moswald, but as far as I know, Moswald built 100 of them or so. And they were sold out like within 10 minutes of him putting the link up.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that's another thing too. Jesus Christ, these things just keep flying off the shelves as quickly as we take and make them. And I had put the initial estimates a couple months ago at about 2,000 of them, almost 2,000 of them out there in the wild. I think we've easily broken the 2,000 marker for the Atari 8-bits. As far as 1.6, the hardware has been released. All the bits and pieces of changes, including the external antenna and whatnot, have been released. The issue now with all the vendors is now pretty much the same problem. Getting our hands on enough the rover chips and the USB to serial UARTs to take and build the damn things.
And as one of the developers, 1.6 is still not released in GitHub, but I know the only difference between the 1.5 and the 1.6 are the pins that the receptacle, the socket.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's the same exact FujiNet. And after talking to Moswald, I decided to build a couple of the external antenna ones just as a test, and those were extremely popular. They solved people's problems. I see Michael nodding his head. Yeah, people that had Wi-Fi connectivity problems with the little internal antenna on the PSP, those were solved with the external antenna. And the ones that I included with the ones I sold was a gigantic, ugly-ass antenna. I mean, you could use something like this if you wanted with wires and put it somewhere else. You could do anything with it, but it was remarkable the difference, and that kind of spurred a couple people to ask, well, why not an Ethernet version of it? And I mean, that is, something that might be beneficial, but I know people like me, the only place where I have an Ethernet connection is in my daughter's bedroom, where it comes in from the cable and attaches to my Wi-Fi router. So
the only
Ethernet.
reason we didn't do the Ethernet connection in the first place is because we ran out of pins. That's basically it. We would have to take anybody who wants to take and do that work, go at it. What you will need to do is to take the existing IO that we're doing and to run them through muxes so that you can take and cut down on the number of IO pins that are needed for various functions. And then from that, if you can get enough pins to hook up an Ethernet PHY, then you'll be able to hook up then you'll be able to add an Ethernet port. If you can do that, more power to you. If we can.
Well, I'm thinking if they want to hook up Ethernet, just put if you have Ethernet in that room, just put an access point in that room.
Yeah.
And maybe even isolate it so it only works with the FujiNet or something like that, and then problem solved.
Yeah, I don't see any advantage of having Ethernet. I mean, I think the wireless. The only reason why I'd want to have an external antenna is just in case I have bad, Wi-Fi. But I heard that people had some serious success with the external antenna, and it'd be nice to be able to add it if necessary.
I mean, you can add it to your original one, but it's going to take some very steady hands and some very good eyes, because you've got a little tiny 0402 resistor that has to be moved on the ESP, and then a socket that has to be installed on the ESP. So it's not fun to do by hand. And the ones I got, the ESP that already had that socket put in for my antennaed ones. And the plus about that is if you wanted to use the internal antenna, all you got to do is move that one resistor over. Again, it sounds easy, but when you wear these and your hands aren't quite as solid as they used to be at 17 years old, it's difficult to move that over. But I had really good feedback on the antenna ones that I sent out. I think I had 10 of them, and I'd like to get some more, but again, until I can get some more parts. I mean, and that's the thing where I'm being really, really lazy, because I have enough components in my laboratory, aka the garage, where I could probably make another 75 to 100 FujiNets by hand, but I don't want to do it anymore. I'm having a lot more fun just ordering them 99% done and putting the pins in them and getting them out of here. So, hopefully we'll get the hardware issues sorted out soon. I really hope China starts getting some stuff in. Some of my suppliers said, well, if you want to order a spool of ESP32s, we'll get them that way for you much quicker. But when I checked the price on a spool, I just about passed out. It's like $7,000 for a 1,500 ESPs, and it's like, well, what happens if Moswell changes the ESP on the new versions? Then I'm stuck with 1,500 ESPs that I don't use anymore. Kind of like I got a whole bunch of the 28-pin USB controllers, but none of the 24-pin USB controllers, because that was switched on Rev 1.5. So I'm leery to buy a bunch of hardware that could change. And I know 1.6 is just a small fix, and there's going to be something else after 1.6. Once the socket thing for a lot of people has been a real pain in the ass, where they can't daisy chain, the cable won't stay stuck in the back of that FujiNet. For me, I used a rubber band and I held it in there as long as I needed to copy my floppies, and now I don't have anything plugged into my FujiNet, which is kind of the whole idea of the FujiNet, is not to plug anything into it. So we'll see.
So is that the change then? Is the external improvement on the plug then?
Yes.
Yeah, the 1.6 it's different. He's using a bigger pin in that socket side of the connector, so it grips onto the SIO cables a little bit more firmly. Yes. Those little pins that are in there now are really, really small pins, and there's not much for that Motorola little spring-loaded connector to catch onto. So
right. Well, you mentioned 1.7. Is there a plan already in place for something for that, or
not yet?
Oh, okay.
There are no. Moswell does not have any tentative plans for 1.7. Okay. Once the 1.6 is released, I think from a hardware perspective, we're going to be concentrating on trying to get boards brought up for the other platforms. I mean, for example, Moswald finished the routing for the Coleco Atom version of the FujiNet that's going to be used for my prototyping. He's going to be ordering boards for those, so I can basically move. I don't know if you actually look. I wish I could show a picture of my desk right now. I have this circuit that's spread across 2 breadboards that looks like the Dresden bombing, and then that's my Atom FujiNet. So at present, so we're going to be trying to take and get the other hardware bits and pieces up and running as much as we can.
Yeah, I think the Atari hardware is pretty much nailed down. I mean, there's really nothing else for the base design that in my opinion, needs to be changed.
No.
And the plus about having it all open source, I mean, if somebody has an idea of wanting a different form factor or whatever, then by all means, build it. It's all out there. I at one point was going to work on a version of it that would fit into the old Atari modems, but I kind of gave up interest. I actually bought a modem from Steve, so I would have the case to work with to put the device into it. But I just, I come up with all these ideas, and then life gets in the way. A lot of people think that Vintage Computer Center is my full-time gig, and I don't. I work for the government, and I have a full-time job, and I've got 4 daughters that are still living at home, and I just finished college myself, and life's kind of crazy. So I get all these ideas and want to try things, and I just got another impulse eBay of some Apple boards in the mail. It's like, well, what the hell am I going to do with these? I had an idea, and who has the time? It's like, Jesus.
I don't know how you do it all.
My wife still likes me a little bit, so she wants to spend time with me, and I actually had her out there. The last big batch of FujiNets I did a batch of 100 because I had so many people that wanted them. In fact, my Retro Lemon friend from the other side of the pond is on, who's bought quite a few of them. And then the German Atari group bought 100 of them. My wife was out there. She asked, "What can I do to help?" And it's like, well, where do you want to start? You can clean the boards, you can put the QA stickers on them, you can put the serial numbers on them, you can package them. What do you want to do? And she got to see how much work is involved in mass producing FujiNets, and then dealing with customers if they have problems. And I gotta say, kudos to Moswald, because 99.99% of the problems I've had with customers in the FujiNets have absolutely nothing to do with the FujiNet hardware. The FujiNet hardware is very solid. Most of the problems that I've had are I'm dealing with people like me that, I used to run a bulletin board. I used to do all these things on my Atari back when I was 14, 13 years old. I can barely remember how to, change it, get to DOS and get back out of DOS on the Atari at this point. And that's been the biggest hurdle is people, okay, well, I got this FujiNet, and now what the hell do I do with it? And they're expecting, a 400-page manual. And it's like, you guys, you got to remember, back in 1981, when you bought something, there was hardly anything included with it. You had to figure out how to use it. There wasn't Google, there wasn't YouTube. You poked and prodded until you figured it out. And the problem that today is we're all lazy, man. If we can't point and click, we think it's broken. So, like I said, kudos to Moswell. The hardware has been awesome, with the exception of 1.3. The hardware has been awesome. And I think, I fully support them stopping development on the Atari FujiNet at this point. And let's, move over to Commodore, to Atom, and to Apple, and hell, why not Z80 at some point? I think that there's a lot of people over in Europe that might be interested in that, and then Amiga and ST.
Yes. That's the thing. It's we're wanting to move it over to everything that I can get my hands on, and I'm trying to reach out to as many of these communities as I possibly can. For example, I want to try to get a version of this done and working for the S100 people, so they can take and put this in their Altairs. So it's like I said, it's doable. Once we have a workable bus interface, that will be pretty much elementary to do. And it's important to understand that the main differences between these different targets have to do with writing and debugging the bus target interface for whatever target bus you're going to run, because you're at the end of the day, you're talking to the same bits of core code. And then once you do that, you work out the protocol of how you're going to take and talk to the main machine. Okay, great. The nice thing about once you get past that, the configuration programs and all the things that the user interacts with, well, those are written in C. So that can, that can be just basically a recompile. I did a series of pictures the other day showing that I was able to take and bring up the Atari and the Commodore 64 versions, the Apple II and the Commodore 64 versions of config about 15 minutes apart, because I was able to take and compile the two, because I was able to take and change the target of how it was being compiled. So I have experience basically taking the same bit of code and bringing it to a bunch of different platforms. So.
And that's the plus. Once the bus is figured out, it's going to be easy to roll out to the different platforms. It's
Yes. It's the hardest part is the hardest parts are working out the bus communication and figuring out what, given the target computer, what can we integrate with?
Well, there's other, for the other systems, I find the prices to be quite high compared to the FujiNet, and it does so much more. It's like, I mean, a good example would be was a floppy EMU for the Apples.
Mm-hmm.
So they're $119.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to use them for all your Apples, you got to like load a BIOS up. It's not a switchable thing, as far as I understand it.
And that's what's weird. The floppy emulators that I've seen for the Apple II, those are basically Arduinos.
Mm-hmm.
You're wanting $119 for that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because there's no competition.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just, like I said, and I can do this because I'm in a very unique position. I know my income comes from elsewhere, so this to me is very much soul repair. For the shit that I have to do for my day job on a day-to-day basis, I need to do this other stuff.
Yeah, I looked at the Apple EMU as well here recently. I posted in the Apple group the other day because I want to get this 2 Plus out and start messing with it. And that was the first suggestion. I went and looked at it. It's like, holy shit, that's kind of pricey. So I've been scouring GitHub. I've been looking at any chance I could find to find an open source solution for like an S drive for the Apple, and I would build those in a heartbeat. But so far, I'm not having a lot of luck.
Yeah, no, the Apple II community, you have to remember too, especially when you're making something for the Apple II community, there's a schizophrenic dichotomy, because you've got machines with slots and you got the machines without slots, and trying to make something that can bridge across to both is actually a bit of a challenge.
Well, I'm all for making the hardware for the oldest shit first, so I'm all for the slots first, and then after that, move on to the Macs and the 2GS and that. But
we're developing the FujiNet stuff is being developed on a 2 Plus. So I don't know. I mean, if someone were to donate an A2S0 Apple II with 4K of memory, we could try making it work there too. But
Hey, is that 2 Plus you're trying to develop it on? Is it a stock 2 Plus?
Yeah, pretty much. It's
pretty much. Come on, that's kind of like being kind of pregnant. What is pretty much?
Okay, it's a 2 Plus, so it's got 48K RAM, of course, and the only other it's got a just 2 controller, and it has the lobotomized super serial card that has the soft SP-ROM.
Okay,
that's the comp.
Hey, so if I can find a Z80 Spectrum to donate to you for a few months, would you still consider doing FujiNet for Z80, or is there some other reason why we don't want to do Z80?
The main deal there is, again, a generic bus interface. Once we figure out a generic bus interface for parallel buses, that's possible. But I do have to point out that one of the inspirations for the FujiNet was the SpectraNet. was Dylan Smith's SpectraNet interface, which does a pretty good job already. Now, granted, the FujiNet could do it better, but they already have a pretty good solution. Ironically, so does the TI-99 4A with the Tippy.
Okay. I just,
And that's
you know,
for me. You know what I expect out of these.
We seem to, you know, and it's because we are American, but we seem to focus on what's popular here in the States.
Yes.
And we got to remember that Europe, especially Eastern Europe, has an unbelievably huge community of us old-time geeks, and I'd really like to try to serve them a little bit if we can too. So, you know, and the Timex Sinclair was what's the computer that I almost got was the very first computer, you know, the little Z80 based computer, and my dad saw that in the magazine I was looking at, and I told him I had enough money in my savings account to buy this machine, and he ended up pausing me, and we got the Atari 800. But I was close to the Z80 side, and you know, Z80 still has a huge community out there. Just looking on YouTube, you can see how big it is.
I'm very familiar with it. I have a lot of friends in that community, and as luck would have it, I have here in a case, I have a ZX Omni, which is a ZX Spectrum in laptop form. So it's a real ZX80 in laptop form. It's got batteries and everything, and I can hook the SpectraNet up to it, and it just does really great. So
Andrew, jump in anytime. You don't have to raise it. Raising your hand was only for the host or for the special guest.
I was out cooking dinner for my family, so I didn't want to come back in. I just wanted. I mean, Dylan is actually a friend of mine. I've known him from way back in the Spectrum scene. But what I wanted to say was that because the SpectraNet was out of production for a long time, but Ben Versteeg in the Netherlands has now taken it on, and the interface is now back in production. I think he actually had to move to a slightly different chipset, but it is compatible. So and that, as Tom says, it'll plug straight into your original or reproduction hardware.
Yep. Dylan did a fantastic job on that system, and it was a huge inspiration for me. And actually, Andrew, just so you understand, FujiNet adopted the TNFS protocol, and so it's now TNFS is now, because of FujiNet, spread to other computers and platforms as well, and we've sent back improvements to the protocol upstream back to Dylan to take and for TNFS, and forever thankful for him for that, because the big thing that really hit home for me on the SpectraNet was that it had an immediate out-of-the-box use that you could use it for. You could plug it in, and you could immediately take and connect to take and load games. Dear God, okay, immediate use for everybody. Okay, great, and that was a big plus for us to take. When I started working on FujiNet, that was actually the big reason why we focused on the virtual disk support so quickly. So again, big huge thanks, and I've thanked Dylan more times than I can count for his work on the SpectraNet, because without that, FujiNet would not exist.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he did a great job there. My only involvement was because I'm trying to think, was it Rupert or Richard Altwasser who did the Spectrum design? He carried over the I/O from the TS1000 ZX81.
Yep.
So it only uses partial port detection, which is essentially you in theory you've got 16 bits of ports, but basically you get 16 ports because each one of them is used for a single thing. And so when we were doing ULA Plus, Philip Kendall, who wrote the Fuse Spectrum emulator, put together a database so we could just kind of scour through all of the different Spectrum hardware and try and find one port that clashed with as little other stuff as possible.
Yep. And
in the end, we found port 3B, and I think the only thing that we were aware of that it broke was the ZX printer, which was this horrible thermal paper thing. And we found a hardware workaround for that, where you could make it read 2 data lines and then it wouldn't clash.
Yeah.
And so that gave us, by using that as the low byte of the address, that then gave us 256 registers that we could use for various hardware. Because when Dylan was developing SpectraNet, he didn't have that available to him originally. So originally it would clash with the sound generator. And so when you were using it, the Spectrum would start playing these random noises.
Yep. Fun times. During my work of trying to do different things and studying the SpectraNet and whatnot, I got a huge dose of appreciation for the ZX Spectrum in general. It really is. I've never seen quite another platform where they stuffed 50 pounds worth of chips into a 5-pound bag. So it's just they squeezed every little bit of what was possible out of that hardware. It's impressive.
I think it's got some similarities with the original Apple II in that, I mean, actually both the Apple II and the Spectrum, the way they generate their TV signal completely breaks the standard, and it does it to save component costs. So there's a similar mentality behind them, just, the actual outcome is slightly different.
Yep. No, it's been it's been fun taking and bringing all of this to these different systems. But thankfully, because of the work that the Spectrum community has done, there's not as much of an urgency to take and bring FujiNet to the Spectrum. At some point, yeah, but no, not right now. So.
I think you're muted, Gavin.
I mute myself so you guys don't have to listen to me all the time, but then I forget to unmute myself. So unless anybody's got anything else, I don't know if anybody's got anything else they want to talk about, but might be coming to an end to this.
The only thing I got, and I hate to say it because it's been 30 years in the making, but I've been trying to work on get my butt in gear and work on an assembly language game for the Atari. And essentially I start where I'm good at, that's the graphics. So I've been working on some player missile graphics for this game, as well as the let's try to do a title screen because I kind of liked LucasArts, Lucasfilm originally, their use of graphics mode 9. So I've been doing stuff in Photoshop and then trying to convert it to graphics mode 9. And so I had some success with that. I mean, you're constantly tweaking things to get the right amount of colors without making it look too blurry. And then also trying to get into raster music trackers. I know there's going to be some music for it. So, but there's not a lot of tutorials out there. So I kind of started writing one up myself as I learn it. So not, although I've taken music in the past, I'm not super musically inclined. So it's more like, just like with the graphics, start trying different things to get to work. And so hopefully I have something within a year or so, cross my fingers, but it's a slow thing. It's not something I'm going to sell. It's just a game I'm throw out there. It's based on The Mandalorian. So I just got to come up with a lot of the screens and stuff and work with the limitations of the Atari and how things can be worked out so that I don't run into conflicts that I wasn't aware of. But the stuff, I can't believe some people can just write games from scratch and have no, I don't know how much experience they got, but I'm just sort of blown away because it's sort of complex, and it's one of those things where you go through like a mapping the Atari and just like, what does this mean? But we'll see. I'll keep at it.
So what kind of gameplay is it?
At this point in time, it's basically I'm thinking sort of a puzzle shooter. I mean, there's not a lot of shooting you can do, but essentially because you have Baby Yoda or whatever his new name is, I keep forgetting.
Grogu.
Grogu, thank you. I was thinking it's something the effect of where you'd be able to control the different characters. So essentially, with the Mandalorian, he'd be more of a shooty character, more offensive, and then Grogu would be more defensive, but you can use his force abilities to flip switches and stuff like that and get to small areas. And then because he got his backpack now, you can do I'm thinking a flying level kind of a shooting level or something to that effect, where you could use it for momentary jumps into different areas. So at least a few different screens for variety. It's not going to be something very simple, but as long as I can learn how everything works together, and things don't conflict with one another on a horizontal plane, I don't think the graphics and all that stuff is not too hard. And I'm pretty good at kind of designing games because I know what I like and what I don't like. So, in games, I know where there's sort of a Bible of game design, and a lot of people break it. So I've done this before, so it's just really just getting over my knowledge and the limitations of the hardware.
Nice, that's kind of cool. I like to hear people doing stuff like that. I broke out Stella a few times and thought I was going to try to learn 6502 for the 2600, and I keep hitting a wall and something else comes around, a squirrel runs by the backyard or something, and I lose focus and move on to something else.
Yeah. Well, there's so many great tools now for, I can develop on the PC. I can't say always that the documentation is great, but, I figure things out and I can ask questions. Like I said, the only thing I've ever had trouble with is raster music tracker. There's a lot of demos out there, but it's not a lot of like, how do you do this and how do you do that? But actually just playing with it for a while and plugging these things away, and I kind of figured it out. It's not as hard as I thought it was. So there's a little learning curve.
So you're doing it the old school way, just trying things until you figure out the one that succeeds.
Exactly. I mean, there's tons of books out there, but none of them really say how to write a game specifically. And of course, I'm doing an assembly language, so a lot of the examples are basic. So I just got to figure how to do it in assembly language. But it's just trial and error. It's what it is. But
cool.
Like
Then you'll have.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I said then you're gonna have to port it to the Commodore 64 and the ZX as well. So.
Yeah. Well, that's why I got these old systems. I thought, well, geez, I just don't want to play games on them. I want to write something for them, because that's the thing is, I hate to reuse ideas because I think it's kind of lazy. To me, I'm not taking anything away from people that make like a Pac-Man on some other version, and they're beautiful a lot of times, but I'd like to see something new. And although The Mandalorian is already a product out there that, Lucas has, I think that every concept will be something new. So I also have another couple other ideas that aren't anything that are, it's not like an arcade game. So these will all be new ideas that I came up with. Maybe the property is somebody else's, but it's not like a copy over from some other system. So.
Well, just be careful because it's not Lucas, it's Disney. And coming from someone who used to run a Disney website for a couple of decades, they will very viciously protect their copyright. So be very careful with what you call it, what the creature is.
Yeah. Do they come at, because that's the thing I was worried about, is will they come after you even if you're not charging anybody anything?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. You use a likeness of a Disney-owned thing, and Mickey Mouse is the biggest bitch mouse you're ever going to find on the planet. It's I've seen them go after like guys who make wood signs that are shaped into Disney characters. If they find out about you and they don't like you, when I first developed the website that I had, and this website was real popular before Facebook and Instagram and those types of things. It was called Mickey News. In fact, it's still out there. I just don't do anything with it. But I made really good contacts with Disney when I launched the website to make sure that they sent me press releases that could show in court that they were fully aware of me and fully supporting my venture by them giving me press releases and inviting me to press events and things like that. But back in those days, oh my God, if you were a street vendor selling a blow-up Mickey Mouse and didn't have a license, they'd come after you. They didn't care what it cost. They've got their own attorneys that they're paying the same whether they're working or not. So, just be careful.
Oh no, and I always err on the side of caution, because I know that certain companies have been sort of like with the latest Atari, they were going after Atari Age until they kind of explained, we're not making any money off this or anything like that. But yeah, I usually look at it like, are they going to go after me because I'm making money? And if I'm not making any money, it's just a giveaway. Hopefully they will go after me, but if they do, I'll be ready for, Star Wars Man, or not that name, but something to the effect of, it won't be the Mandalorian, it'll be like Space Jetpack Man, and then I'll just change a couple of graphics around, so they have no chance. But yeah, I'm gonna try it, and if what are they gonna do? I was like, hey, it's on the internet. I'll change the name if you want, but
yeah, and like Z posted here, Disney has helped change laws to keep their IP out of public domain, because that was a big thing too. That public domain is only so many years, and Mickey Mouse is an old ass mouse, and typically he would have been in public domain at this point. But yeah, Disney has changed a lot in the last decade. The website that when I was running that website when it was in its heyday, I was getting 1.2 to 1.5 million visitors a month on the website. And little kids were sending me written letters thinking I was Disney because I put the PO box that I was using for it. And Disney left me alone. But like I said, from the very beginning, I made contacts with Disney and made sure that they knew who I was. And, even the logo that I created was, the silhouette of the mouse ears. And that petrified my attorney. And they didn't come after me, but I was always a big cheerleader for them. So I think that was what made a big difference. If I would have been cynical of them or pointing out their flaws, they probably would have ripped into me like no tomorrow. But I was always, go Disney, go Disney. And hence that's part of the reason why I really don't run the website anymore, because I don't agree with the company anymore. And I don't agree with the things that they're doing and the prices that they're charging. But, just based on past experiences, I know they could be pretty vicious. And when you said Mandalorian, that is a hot franchise right now. So that's one I think they will try to protect in any way they can. So maybe reach out to them. Maybe they'd be interested in working with you. I have no idea, but
well, yeah, and it's such an it's on an old system. You think, okay, I'm not making any money off of it. It's on a system that they're never going to develop anything for. So you kind of wonder. Maybe it's even just something I test the waters to see how how they get, and then I go, hey everybody, guess what? Disney's just a bunch of a-holes.
Having dealt with this kind of stuff before, I would say, either you'll fly under the radar, or they'll find you, and then you'll get the takedowns. As a developer, my advice would be, if you're doing cross assembly, have a text file where you pull the text in, and just use all placeholder text initially. And then if you happen to leak the underground file that changes the palette colors and everything, because at that resolution, there's not a lot they can do. But yeah, so the other one is, Star Wars has never been a good property to go for. They've always defended that. Star Trek used to be a lot more lenient, but lately, because people were making money off it, they've just shut everybody down, including the fan stuff that they were just giving away free. In fact, anything Nintendo, they will totally go after you. But weirdly, Sonic fan projects are totally cool now. I contributed to one way back in the day, and just because of the industry I was in, I wrote to Sega because I couldn't take the chance, and they said, thanks for contacting us, but no, we're not going to allow that now. They've changed their policy since. So Sonic is totally cool, but pretty much anything else, I would have an option to do something different. The only other one I can think of actually is Ultima, weirdly, considering it's Electronic Arts, but there's been like a long-standing history of Ultima fan games. And for a while, I don't know if they're still doing it, but they actually used, EA itself would give an award for the fan project of the year.
Wow. See, that's the way it should be, is they should encourage fans, as long as they're not, sort of, even if with an Atari game, how many people are actually going to buy that thing, and how much money are you going to make off of it? The amount of time you're putting into an effort, you're not going to make a ton of money. It's a drop in the bucket to Disney. But I understand if they let something go, they're going to have to let everybody go, and
Disney's more worried about their brand, and it's not that you're going to be making money off of it, but you might damage their brand in some way that's going to affect a different asset of their company. And I think that's their biggest concern. Like you said, who's going to buy it? There may be, if you sell it for $5-10, yeah, you're probably going to sell a few hundred copies to us geeks on Facebook just because we want to check it out. But you're not going to get some huge market share on it. But again, maybe Grogu does something obscene, and Disney's going to trip out about that because Grogu peed on somebody or something. It's just, you never know. So
right, no, I totally get that, because you're basically making their product look bad. And I hate to say it, but Disney's already doing that as well with all their products. So
Having said
I should be able
that,
to sue
though,
them for The Last Jedi.
I have a feeling that I have seen Wreck-It Ralph games out there.
Yeah,
on
there's the
various
arcade
platforms
version.
that people have not taken, that Disney have left. So yeah, you can always try your luck, but have a fallback plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, their first round is going to be a cease and desist from their
Sure.
attorney, unless they think you've made millions and millions of dollars and there's something they can recoup on. But the first thing is just going to be a letter from their attorney saying, knock it off. And then, like Andrew said, just change the names of everything, and problem is solved.
I would love to have a cease and desist from Disney and put it on my wall.
That would be kind of cool.
Yeah, but there's always a positive in something.
Absolutely. So Mr. Retro Lemon, are you out there? Or are you just stalking us? I see him on, but I haven't heard or seen anything from him. So I'm kind of figuring he might be asleep in England over there. And Andrew, where are you from?
Well, long story. I lived in London for about a decade, but I'm in Ireland now.
Okay. Beautiful country.
It is. They don't call it the Emerald Isle for nothing, although that is partly down to the rainfall.
Yeah, I was just about to say that was the thing I noticed when I was dating my current wife. I was like, gosh, why is Ireland so green? Oh, that's why.
Because it's wet.
We're an island in the middle of the Atlantic and it rains a lot.
Well, that's like the East Coast of the United States. It's very green, but it's because it's always raining. And I don't mind the rain. I spend a lot of time indoors, so the rain doesn't bother me. I can open a window and enjoy the fresh air of the smell of the rain. And
But I was going to say, going back to the copyright thing, so I have my own game project that's been in development hell for 20 years, which started out as one thing, but it's now like an intermediate episode between Ultima 3 and Ultima 4. But I have this sort of plan that if it's any good, that I might want to put it out commercially. So I have my plan to change all of the titles. So instead of Lord British, it'll be Laird Scottish.
Wait, are you going to do a cloth map with it though?
Oh, I have a cloth map. That's done.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
It's probably kicking. No, I have the whole. The box art was designed a long time ago because, like yourself, I lead with the graphics. So all of that was done a very long time ago. What helped me, I briefly worked for PlayStation. And while I was there, I got to work on the in-house game engine. And I was recommended a book by one of the guys at Naughty Dog, which is just a game engines book. And then having read all of that, I went back and looked at my code and went, well, this is terrible. And I turned my code into a game engine. So it's completely modular, and the nice thing about that is it actually just makes it a lot easier to work on, because if you're just working on the effects engine, or if you're just working on like the map part, it all sort of works in isolation so that you can kind of plug away on that. And then if you run into a roadblock, you put it down and you go and work on a different part of it, rather than trying to get the whole thing going together, which once you get beyond about 16K of assembly language, it's really horrific. And I know, because the firmware on the machine I'm working on is about 40K right now. I'd really rather move to C at some point.
And that's
how I looked at other people's games, and they do that. They make them in modules so that you can break it apart.
I really need to point something out here. I do assembler when I have to, but what I've learned over and over again when doing 8-bit software development in C, 99% of the crap that people say when you have to do everything in assembly is bullshit. It's bullshit. Once you understand a bit about what actually gets generated when you do certain bits of C, you learn how to take and crunch things down. And if you do your work in C, you'll get a lot more done a lot faster. And you'll realize, okay, well, actually, there is this part that I need to do in assembler. Well, okay, fine, go back and do that part in assembler. But you don't have to do the whole damn thing in assembler just because you're targeting a game on the 8-bit.
that has gotten shattered so many times over.
I would
What parts
agree
do you
with that.
find? What parts do you find you need to do in assembler? Is it mostly just the graphic stuff? You know, basically
Graphics
run the
output most of the time.
Good to know.
Yeah. So in my game, because the Spectrum has such a low resolution color, it's like the character mode in the C64, but it's stored in shared RAM. So if you use the stack to shove data into the RAM fast enough, you can get, instead of 2 colors per 8x8 cell, you can get 2 colors per 8x1 cell. But then the code to do that gives you, it takes up about 2/3 of your CPU time, and it's all unrolled loops. So it's also hugely memory intensive, which means that, and the reason that most of my code is in assembly is mostly for space, because it's also tape based. And so it's a single load. On a PC, it would be about a 4 megabyte game, and it's got to fit in 128K of RAM. Just the tile map alone, there's 2 tile sets because there's a 3D dungeon as well, because I tried to make it look a bit like Ultima 5. So that eats up about 32K, and then you've got the world map is another 16K, and anyway, yeah. So it's, there's actually not that much code. It's mostly data, but the code that's there. Okay, Reese. I've got to do bedtime soon. But yeah, so it's the scripting language is actually going to be based on a Perl basic to assembly converter. So all the script will be written in effectively classic basic, because that's all pretty simple, and you don't need to get into like the assembly level to do that. And then it makes the engine reusable if I or somebody else wants to do something with it in future.
Yep, that's for sure. And there are, on the ZX Spectrum, I've seen some incredible graphic output engines on the ZX Spectrum. Bifrost and all of Einar Sarkis's work, which is just like, holy crap. Seeing these tiles, seeing these soft sprites, all bouncing on the screen at the same time on a machine, when you realize how the ZX Spectrum video output works, is just, it blows my mind.
Well, I'm pleased to say Bifrost was based on my own engine. He kind of re-engineered it. I said to him, well, you can take it and run with it, because I'm doing a tile engine with mine. So he said, right, I'm going to do sprites. And then he never looked back.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing now. It's gotten to the point on the ZX Spectrum that you can sit down with a copy of Z88DK and hammer out your game logic and attach it to the engine and have something running very quickly. It's wonderful.
So Thomas, if you were going to develop a game for the 8-bit computer, the Ataris, what environment would you use to develop that game?
CC65 and a copy of Emacs. There are a number of tools. The Polish contingent have come up with a number of wonderful graphics editors to take and do all the graphics resources. So, just do all your development there, quickly take and iterate through it on the emulators. You're very lucky in this case because, since you can do this and since you can do the development in Altera and be reasonably sure that what's going to come out is what's going to run on the hardware, you can do all the development outside, fast turnaround times, and you have access to an absolutely amazing debugger that you can stop at any point and see anything that's happening. And that pretty much, ironically, that'll go for either if you want to take and do something for the Atari 8-bit or if you want to do something for the Atari VCS.
So you're talking about tools. This is what I've got so far. I've got Atari Graphics Studio, Envision.
Very good.
Yeah, is it Graph to Font?
Yep, G2F, very good.
Yeah, and a font maker one as well. So those are the ones I have. And then of course there's
also.
What is it?
I think GFX, because I would say that there are a lot of materials on the Polish Atari Online channel. Unfortunately, it's in Polish. But probably I could invite some people, for example, Bociano, or maybe others would like to make a presentation of those programs and techniques of development, Math Pascal, etc., etc., etc.
Hey, I think that's a fantastic idea for a real soon upcoming meeting, to have the focus on retro development and the people that want to develop software today for those computers back in the past. I really think that, you know, that young guy we had here from Israel really gave me hope that once we die, there's going to be some people that still want to play with this shit. You know, and not all of them are going to be purists like me and have to have the real hardware, that, you know, they're going to be fine with an emulator. But I think, you know, if we could get a group of people together that would give tips on, you know, where to begin if you've never done it before, and, you know, it actually might kind of filter into helping Thomas at some point too, because Thomas needs developers. And what I really think is that we're kind of get this big gap. We've got people like me that have forgotten 99.9% of the things we ever knew about the Atari. And then we've got people like this kid that came from Israel that they really haven't been exposed to any of it yet, but seem like they really want to be exposed to it. So, you know, my only concern with the Polish developers is sometimes you guys are really hard to understand. You know, the communication and you know, the translation of English and Polish, sometimes it can be challenging. So, you know, while I welcome any input and anybody that can help people that want to get into development, I think it would be a really good meeting to get people together. I mean, Andrew, definitely, you know, these people that are working today on developing the software for these old computers, I think would be a great topic for an upcoming meeting. So, you know, if you can get some people together, Peter, and if any of you can think of people that could be invited to it, the more the merrier, in my opinion. You know, I think
sure,
that,
I think that this is a case of practice, and I will encourage them to participate in such meetings and to listen and saying something and preparing some presentations. So
I mean, the question that I just asked Thomas was, the question that I just asked Thomas wasn't, you know, just a lighthearted thought. It's like, if I wanted to start, if I wanted, you know, being somebody with no experience, and I do have experience. I've done all the machine language books. I've played around with machine language. I'm not a huge fan of machine language because of its, you know, you've got to be focused on every single individual computer system, whereas something like C, I can cross-compile it into multiple systems at one time with maybe a little bit of tweaks on the graphics. But if you can help people get from zero knowledge to being able to produce something, I think there needs to be some guides out there. Maybe there are some better ones that I just haven't found online that take me from point A to point Z. It seems like YouTube is a good resource, but the shitty thing with YouTube is YouTube guys get bored halfway through something and stop. You know, I can't tell you how many times I was looking at learning Unity and learning Blender, and I found a YouTube channel that the guy just had awesome lessons. And you get halfway through, and he just like, man, fuck it, I'm not doing it anymore, and kind of left like, okay, now what? Udemy has been a great source. I mean, I know Udemy has got a 6502 assembly class as well. I haven't checked it out yet, but you know, it just seems like if we could do a couple of meetings trying to get would-be developers with seasoned developers and, you know, trying to put them under their wing and mentor them, it might be very beneficial. But who knows? Maybe I'm the only one that thinks that way. But
I agree 100%. I agree with Thomas that if it's not necessary to write code in assembler, do it in other language and treat it as a glue for even assembly procedures. And last few weeks, I write some codes and exploring action, and also I post information that maybe somebody has idea to writing or solving some problems, I can help with that. And many people liked this post, but didn't write anything else. But I'm exploring action and right now. So if somebody wants to help me and play with that language, it's welcome.
Action looks a lot like machine language. I see a lot of machine language stuff in the action code that you sent snippets of.
Action is kind
That's
of
right. That's right. But let's take a point of view that, for example, 40 years ago, Fortran was a glue language for numeric procedures written in assembler or C. Right now, for example, in modern computing, Python is a glue language for different procedures written in C or mostly in C. And action is kind of language that could be treated as glue for other procedures in action or assemblies. But it will speed up development.
Yeah, action is kind of interesting because the language designer took a number of compromises when he was designing this language, and ultimately came up with something that it's Algol. It's definitely Algol. It's enough Algol so that if you're familiar with Pascal or C, you can flip between them and you can see what's going on. And there are enough simplifications that he didn't have to implement the complexities of having to implement a stack frame, the complexities of having to take and bring a language like C or Pascal to the Atari, which traditionally at that point would have required virtual machine type stuff like UCSD Pascal and whatnot. The code that Action generates is actually very good. It's very straight and to the point when it by the time it boils down to assembler, and it allows you to jump into assembler, like I said, if you need to take and write speed sensitive stuff very quickly. It doesn't, I think the best way to describe it is it doesn't get in your way. It gets out of your way very quickly when you want it to.
Yeah, I can only complain about bugs, for example.
Yeah,
I've seen lately, for example, that you cannot declare array with negative values. But actually, it is last thing I want to do it. But there is a bug, and also other bugs, I suppose. So
it's a good thing now that Action's been reasonably reverse engineered to the point where people are making fixes to it. So
yeah,
yay.
I threw Bill Kendrick's name in the chat. He's very good at it. Action has written some games in it, so if you want to ping him, he might help you. But at least at the very least, he might be able to answer questions for you.
Sure.
So jumping back, you were asking about the cloth map. I can't find it. I don't know where I've put it, but I did find the character cards that I made up. These are based on the Ultima Forever artwork, which again, there's a sort of Creative Commons. If you don't charge for it, you can use it. But I reworked the back panel because, like in Ultima 3, I've got 11 character classes instead of 8, and as a result, I've got 11 cards. So the main work I had to do on these was removing the codex symbol, because in the period the game is set, there is no codex. Which
hurry up and finish this game, Andrew.
I know.
Yeah, seriously.
I'm trying to finish it before I'm 50. But the good news is that like all of the really hard work, which is the writing, the plot, and all that kind of stuff, that's all done. So I mean, it really is just finishing off the engine and getting it all to work. And I got the Ultimate Dragons, like Richard Garrett used to do with the players when they got in touch with him. I got them all to kind of create their own non-play characters. So they won't even remember, like, it's been so long since I asked them to do it. So it comes out and go, oh no, wait, did I create that?
Yeah, where did that come from? Oh, funny. You know, the only thing what we need right now is for something like Unity to develop a portion that would allow you to create in Unity and dump it straight back out to the 6502. Then life would be awesome, because then we could just learn C#.
There is a project called 8-Bit Unity, which
yeah, I saw that.
6502s, but not being a 6502 guy, I don't know sort of how far advanced it is. But also going back to what you were saying before, though, I mean, I'm having worked in modern video games development, I'm very happy to talk generally in a platform agnostic way about just, you know, how you can do modern game development techniques and apply them to retro systems to just improve your pipeline, just, you know, save yourself all of the hassle that the bedroom coders used to have back in the day. Because we do have better tools now.
Yes, we do, by far.
Well, guys, I think we're getting close. I hear some little ones that need to go to sleep, and I'm not sure where everybody else is. I know, you know, me and Steve are still in our oh, nope, it's noon now. Oh God.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah, my
bored
wife's
everybody else. It's
Lunchtime.
I'm sure my wife's
Well,
gonna get on my case.
Guys, I appreciate you all coming here. Andrew, I hope you come to one of our next ones, especially if we do more development stuff. I was glad to see we had quite a few new people show up to this one. Hopefully we'll come back for the next one. I'm still working on next month. Again, I thought I had Nolan nailed down, and then he friggin' vanishes again. So someday we're gonna have Nolan Bushnell on here, but you know, anybody come up with ideas for people that we could reach out to come and share with us, you know, I'm more than happy. You get in contact with me on Facebook or go to vintagecomputercenter.com and email me there, whatever. You know, just get a hold of me and let me know if you can think of people that we can bring in here, because I think we're growing, and I think we're going in a great direction. So hopefully we can keep the momentum going.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for putting this on, Gavin.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was a pleasure as always. And I hope that all of you guys had, I'm sure maybe there's still a gal left on here. They're kind of quiet, but I hope you all have a great weekend, and looking forward to talking to you again soon.
Yep.